6 months ago, I packed everything I could fit into 2 suitcases and left Vancouver behind. It wasn't dramatic. No big scene, no shouting match. Just the slow, bitter end of a friendship that had once meant everything. Tara and I had been inseparable since high school, until we weren't. There was betrayal, manipulation, a final argument that left us both raw and resentful. I needed a reset, and Toronto felt far enough. Now I live in a cramped, drafty apartment in the Junction Triangle. My job in marketing is the kind where you work long hours for mediocre pay, constantly terrified of making a mistake big enough to get fired. But it's something, a routine, a place to start again. Running became my lifeline. High Park was close, quiet in the early hours, all mist and cold air and crunching leaves. I liked the way it made me feel grounded. Each step cleared out the noise. It wasn't about being fast, just forward. That's where I first saw her, Lena Dawson. She passed me like I wasn't even moving. Long legs, perfect stride, sleek ponytail bouncing behind her. Her running gear looked expensive, coordinated. She didn't sweat like the rest of us. At first, I thought she was just one of those morning regulars I'd never noticed, but then, one morning, she slowed down. "You're getting better," she said. Her voice was smooth, confident. "But your form's off. You'll wreck your knees." I smiled, unsure if it was a compliment or criticism. "Oh, thanks," she grinned. "I'm Lena." That's how it started. A casual run, a quick chat, no pressure. But something about her pulled me in, and I didn't see the warning signs. Not yet. The next week, Lena started showing up more, often. At first it seemed like coincidence, her route happened to cross mine. But eventually we were running together regularly. Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. Same trail, same pace. She always showed up right on time, already stretching like she had been waiting. She was magnetic in that way some people are. Funny, sharp, like she had the cheat codes for life. I was awkward in comparison, still figuring out how to fit into this new city. I liked being around her. She made things feel easier. "You should run faster," she told me once, flashing a teasing smile. "I bet you could keep up if you dropped a few pounds." I laughed, half unsure if she was joking. "Gee, thanks." She shrugged. "Just trying to help." She always knew the right advice, what to eat, which muscles to target, the best trail shoes. And honestly, I listened. It felt good to have someone care enough to notice, even if her words stung sometimes. She'd text me randomly, throughout the day, articles on discipline, links to workout gear I couldn't afford, budgeting apps with titles like "No Spend, No Problem." "You don't need to buy coffee," she told me one morning. "You're just addicted to the idea of treating yourself." She made it sound like she was looking out for me, like she saw my potential when no one else did. I started turning down happy hour invites with coworkers. I didn't have the energy anyway. Lena called them distractions. "They're not your real friends," she said. "They don't push you to be better." And part of me believed her, because who was I really, without someone else showing me how to improve? Things started shifting in small, almost invisible ways. It was a Friday morning when I found her waiting at the corner by my building. "You didn't answer my text," she said. "Thought I'd just meet you here." I hadn't told her where I lived. I felt a pinch in my stomach but tried to shake it off. "Oh, yeah. Sorry, I slept through it." She waved it off like it wasn't weird, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, my phone buzzed at 3:07 a.m., a missed call from Lena. No message. When I asked her about it the next day, she laughed. "Wrong number," she said, but then she showed up again, near the steps of my building. No jog this time, just standing there with her phone in hand. "Just passing by," she said, like it was perfectly normal to pass by someone's place before dawn. My sister Priya came to visit the following weekend. Lena met her briefly at a cafe, and the moment she walked away, Priya leaned across the table and whispered, "That girl's copying you." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Hair, shoes, even how she talks." "It's creepy, Maya." I told her she was overreacting. But later that night I scrolled through Lena's Instagram and saw it. The same haircut I'd gotten the week before. Same color too. Identical. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, Lena sent a text. Lena, you didn't run today. Slacking again? The message hit like a punch. How did she know she was watching? I was sure of it. I tried to create space, cancel a run, take a different trail, but Lena always found a way back in. One morning, she knocked on my door at 6 a.m. unannounced. You okay? She asked, peering into my apartment like she owned it. You've been acting weird. I made up an excuse. Work deadlines, headaches. She didn't buy it. Then came the final straw. At the office, my boss called me in. Maya, he said, if you need time off, just say it. Your friend seemed pretty worried. My throat went dry. Friend? He nodded. Lena Dawson? She called, said you've been under a lot of stress. I hadn't given Lena his number. I hadn't even told her his name. That night, I blocked her on every platform, deleted her contact, locked the door, drew the blinds. For 2 days, I heard nothing. Silence finally. Then, unknown. Number. You're really going to ghost me? After everything? My stomach flipped. That same day, I noticed my spare apartment key was gone from the drawer where I kept it. A shadow moved past my car window as I got in that evening. No face, just a figure. Watching. I didn't wait. I called Priya. By the weekend, she had flown in, helped me install cameras, changed my locks, sat with me while I filed a report. She hasn't done anything illegal, the officer told me, scribbling on a clipboard. But keep the messages. If it escalates, we'll have it on record. He meant well, but it didn't make me feel any safer. I didn't know what Lena wanted, but I knew what she'd taken: my trust, my space, my silence. I stopped running in High Park. Too many memories there. Too many corners where someone could hide. Instead, I joined a gym. Fluorescent lights, loud music, people everywhere. It wasn't peaceful, but it felt safe. A month passed without a word from Lena. Slowly, I started breathing again. Then Mr. Kowalski, the old man with the terrier, waved me down near the corner of my street. That pushy girl, he said in his thick accent. She asked about you last week. My blood turned cold. Lena? He nodded. I told her you moved. She looked angry. I thanked him. Went home, checked the cameras, nothing new. Just shadows and trees. Priya wanted me to leave Toronto altogether. But I didn't want to run again. Not that kind of running. Not anymore. I still jog, some mornings. Early, just as the city's waking up. Sometimes I feel her, behind me, beside me, watching from somewhere I can't see. But I don't turn around, because I know what's there. Lena wasn't a friend. She was something else entirely. A mask worn too well. A shadow that fed off attention, off control. I tell myself I'll forget her someday, but I don't believe it. Some people leave fingerprints in your life. Others leave bruises. And then there are the ones who wear your reflection until you can't recognize yourself anymore. If you ever meet someone who shows up too often, says all the right things, and knows just a little too much about you, run. Not for your health, for your life. I moved to Chicago in February. Bad timing in every possible way. It was cold, expensive, and way lonelier than I expected. After breaking things off with Mark, I needed a reset. I convinced myself the city would fix everything. New place, new work, new me. Freelancing was the plan. I'm a graphic designer. Logos, branding, the occasional social media package. But clients were flaky, and pay was even flakier. Most days I counted coins before buying coffee. My apartment in Lincoln Park was barely more than a box, but it had heat and a view of the alley, so silver linings. That's how I ended up at the Jewel Osco that day, weighing my options between off-brand oatmeal and ramen. I was running on fumes, both financially and emotionally. That's when she crashed into me. Groceries spilled across the aisle. Her basket, my box of cereal, everything. Ugh, I swear this store is cursed. She laughed, dropping to her knees to help me gather things. Her coat was vintage-looking but worn, and she had this messy, just effortless enough bun that made her look like she walked out of an indie film. Striking green eyes, confident smile. "Sorry," I said. "No, my fault. I'm always in a rush," she said, grinning. "I'm Kara." She said she just moved here too. Freelance photographer, bouncing between gigs and staying with a cousin in the meantime. We bonded over how expensive everything was and how hard it was to make friends in a new city. Before I left, she handed me her number on the back of a receipt. "We should grab coffee sometime. This was fun." That night I texted her. She responded right away. It felt like maybe things were finally turning around. We got coffee that weekend, a tiny place with lopsided chairs and burnt espresso. She ordered a black coffee, no sugar, no milk, said she hated fancy nonsense. I liked her immediately. She talked fast, hands always moving. Her laugh was big, unfiltered. She asked questions, lots of them, about my job, my ex, my family. I didn't even notice how much I was telling her until we'd been sitting for over an hour. She told me about her own mess, how she left a toxic relationship, how she was crashing with her cousin, but it was tense, not permanent. I nodded like, I understood because I did. That need to escape, to start again. It made me trust her. Week 2, she bumped into me at the gym I barely used. "Small world," she said, already in leggings and a sports bra like she belonged there. We ran into each other again, at a bookstore, a diner, a CTA stop. She always acted surprised, but it started to feel planned. Still, I liked the attention. Freelancing from home meant I went days without real human interaction. Alex, my best friend, was swamped in med school, and everyone else I knew was somewhere else. Week 3, she showed up at my door with a bottle of wine. "Hope this isn't weird. I just needed out of that house. It wasn't weird. Or maybe I didn't let myself think it was." We sat on my old futon, drank cheap red wine, and complained about life. She made me laugh. She made me feel seen. So when she asked if she could crash just one night, I didn't hesitate. She sounded scared. What kind of person turns someone away when they're scared? It was a Thursday night when she called, 1:12 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was half asleep and my phone lit up like something urgent. "Hey," I mumbled, voice scratchy. Her voice cracked through the speaker. "He showed up at my cousin's. I can't go back there. I don't know what to do." I sat up. "Who?" "My ex. He found me. I don't feel safe. I didn't think. I just said it. You can stay here, just for the night." She showed up in 20 minutes with a worn duffel bag and red-rimmed eyes. I offered her the couch, some tea, but she just asked for a blanket and curled up without another word. I didn't sleep much after that. My apartment felt smaller with her in it. Not unsafe, just crowded. The next morning I made coffee. She was cheerful, almost glowing. "I can't thank you enough," she said. "You seriously saved me." She stayed while I went to a client meeting. I left her the spare key, just in case she needed to go out. It wasn't until I walked back, through the door around 4 p.m. that I realized something was wrong. The lights were off. The front door was slightly ajar, and everything was gone. My laptop, my camera, the necklace my grandmother gave me, all missing. The duffel bag she'd brought, still there, empty. Just a rolled-up hoodie and some crumpled tissue. But the spare key, still sitting neatly on the counter. She wanted me to know it was her. She wanted me to understand that none of it was real. I called Alex first. They didn't say "I told you so," but the silence said it loud enough. I thought she was in trouble, I kept repeating. She sounded scared. "Jordan, that's what they do," Alex said. "They play on empathy." I filed a police report the next morning. The officer at the front desk took my statement, then passed me off to a detective, Ruiz. Middle-aged, tired eyes, very direct. "She tell you she was a photographer?" he asked. I nodded. "She have a tragic breakup story?" "Yeah." He just nodded slowly. "Classic grift. You're not the first." Turns out Kara, or whoever she was, had no traceable name, no legit work history, No social media under the contact she gave me. Her number was disconnected by the time I'd tried. Calling again. Ruiz said these scams were becoming common, preying on people who were lonely, new, too kind to question things. She knew exactly what she was doing. She lets you think you're saving her, Ruiz said. But you're just a mark. Hearing that word, mark, made me feel sick. Like I'd been in a con movie without knowing it. Like everything from that cereal aisle to that final morning was scripted. I replaced my locks that same day. Bought a deadbolt. Deleted her number, even though it wasn't working anymore. I stopped going to that Jewel Osco. Took the long way to the gym. Avoided eye contact in public. I wasn't just embarrassed. I was angry. At her. At myself. At how easy it was to be fooled. Weeks passed. I buried myself in client work, tried to act like nothing had happened. I didn't tell most people. What would I even say? Hi. I let a scammer into my life because I was lonely and dumb. Alex came by more often after that. We didn't talk about Kara much, but I could tell they were checking in, just in case I was still too open, still too trusting. I kept replaying little things, how Kara always seemed to run into me, how she asked so many questions, how she never let me into her world. Just enough info to sound real, but always vague, always in control. The worst part wasn't the stuff she stole. It was that I thought we were friends. It was that I opened my door to someone and believed, just for a moment, that maybe kindness really was enough to build a connection. Then, 2 months later, Detective Ruiz called. Thought you should know, he said. Another case, Logan Square. Same story, same description. She's still out there. I didn't feel better. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. Since then, I've been more careful. I still talk to strangers, can't help it. But something in me shifted. I don't give people the benefit of the doubt so quickly. I ask more questions. I check receipts. Trust, I've learned, is something you build brick by brick, not something you toss at anyone who smiles at you. And sometimes, the people who seem the kindest are just the best at pretending. I was 11 the summer of 2004, the kind of scrawny kid people look past in class photos. Asthma, thick glasses, always sketching birds in a spiral notebook. I liked rules, nature documentaries, and finding cool rocks in the creek behind our duplex. Cody Brenner was everything I wasn't. Fast, tan, loud. His dad was a gym teacher and coached every sport that existed. His mom made cookies for bake sales and called my mom sweetie at PTA meetings. Everyone loved the Brenners. It started because our moms worked together at the hospital. One day, mine said, "Why don't you hang out with Cody after school? He could use a friend." I think what she meant was, I work doubles, and he lives next door. Just try. Cody didn't want a friend. He wanted someone to humiliate. At first, it was wrestling. That meant headlocks in his backyard while he told me to tap out, nerd. Then came science experiments, where he stuck. Firecrackers and apples, or once my fingers. Relax, he said, lighting the fuse. It'll pop, not blow. I didn't tell my mom. I figured she wouldn't believe me, or worse, she'd try to talk to the Brenners, and there was this 1 second after Cody shoved me or burned me or dared me into something stupid when he'd look at me and laugh like we were in on a joke together. That part confused me the most. I used to think, maybe this is what boys are supposed to do. Maybe I was the weird one. But then one night, everything changed. The jungle gym behind Fair Hill Elementary had been condemned for years. Rusted metal bones, half the stairs missing. But it was still there, hiding behind tall grass and busted fencing like a relic from a war no one remembered. Cody brought a chunk of concrete in his backpack that day. "You're gonna climb it," he said, tossing it between his hands. "All the way to the top, or I tell everyone at camp you cried last week." I didn't cry last week, not really. He just twisted my arm too far and my breath caught in my throat. My asthma acts up when I'm stressed. But I nodded. Of course I nodded. The sun was setting, that kind of humid orange light where everything looks like a memory. I started climbing, my inhaler thumping in my pocket with every pull. The rusted bars bit into my palms, and I tried not to look down. Cody was quiet. That should have warned me. When I reached the top, arms shaking, I turned and raised a hand in victory. Made it! That's when I heard it. Whish, crack. A sharp thud hit my forehead. For a second, everything stopped. No pain yet. Just heat and confusion. Then blood, thick and sudden, down my cheek into my mouth. I remember my legs slipping, my hands trying to grab air, then the hard slam into mulch. Cody stood there frozen, concrete chunk still in his hand. His first words? Shit. My dad's gonna bench me. Not are you okay, not I'm sorry. That's when I knew. This was never friendship. I was just practice. The last thing I remember clearly before passing out was a voice shouting my name. Not Cody's. Mr. Petrovsky. He lived 2 doors down. X something. Army maybe, or something more. His porch always smelled like cigars and machine, oil. He'd sit there all day, cleaning an old rifle and nodding at kids like we were distant relatives he was keeping tabs on. He lifted me like I was nothing. Carried me across the alley like a sack of bones. My blood soaked through his undershirt. I remember how firm his grip felt, like nothing bad could get past his hands. Cody trailed behind, silent. When my mom opened the door and saw my face, she dropped her keys. Later at the ER, the doctor said I had a concussion and 6 stitches across my temple. The bruises on my back, old ones, got attention too. One of the nurses asked questions. My mom didn't have answers. Cody never apologized, but I heard from another kid that his dad lost it over the incident. Not because of what happened to me, but because Cody might miss the playoffs. Mrs. Brenner came by once. She brought a card, said Cody felt awful, didn't look me in the eye. I didn't say a word. Petrovsky came by too, 2 days later. He stood on our porch, hat in hand, eyes hard as steel. He's not your friend, he said. Friends don't use you to make themselves feel bigger. Then he handed me a leather pouch of polished rocks. Found these in Montana. You like that stuff, right? I nodded. I still have them. The Brenners moved out 2 weeks later. Football opportunities out west, my mom said. Better program. New start. I didn't say anything. She looked guilty, like she finally saw the bruises she'd missed and didn't know how to say sorry. I didn't need her to. We both knew. That summer crawled by. I stayed inside mostly. Played old Star Wars VHS tapes on loop and filled pages of my nature journal with birds I made up. At night, I traced the scar near my temple. By the time school started, Cody was just a name people muttered when they saw the dented jungle gym. In high school, I heard he got kicked off his team for accidentally breaking another player's arm. Different town, same patterns. Senior year, he showed up at our homecoming game. Recognized me right away. Coop, he said, grinning like we'd shared ice cream and secrets. Man, we were crazy kids. He tried to hug me. I stepped back. He laughed. Still weird, huh? Still weird. That stuck. He walked away without saying anything else. And just like that, Cody was gone again. Now I'm older. I've got a kid of my own. He's small, like I was. Sensitive. Last month, he told me a boy at school called him weird, asked if he should try to fit in more. I told him what I wish someone had told me back then. Being different doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It means something's right. Never let someone convince you hurt feels like friendship. He asked if I ever had a best friend growing up. I paused. No, I said. But I had a man on a porch who knew what danger looked like. Sometimes that's enough. He didn't understand. He will one day. Just because someone smiles when they hurt you doesn't make it love. Real friends don't test your pain threshold, they protect it. Trust your gut. And teach your children the same. Before all this, my life was painfully boring. Wake up, feed Gus my orange tabby, grab a sad granola bar, ride the T downtown, sit in a cubicle under flickering lights for 8 hours at Evershire Financial, staring at insurance claims and listening to case file with one earbud in. Rinse. Repeat. Boston in October is all pumpkins and crime tours, which felt appropriate. I'd moved here after a breakup with someone who said I was emotionally checked out. Maybe they were right. I've always liked being on the outside looking in, especially when it came to crime. True crime podcasts made me feel like I understood people. Why they cracked, why they snapped, the patterns, the motives. Everything made more sense when it was narrated in a dry Australian accent and scored with unsettling piano. That's how Diana Cole found me. She started 2 floors down in accounting, but ended up leaning over my cubicle wall one Tuesday morning, sipping from a sleek metal thermos. "Oh, you like case file?" she asked. I pulled out my earbud, startled. "Yeah. You listen too?" She smiled. Calm, unreadable. "That episode's wrong. The killer didn't use a knife first. He strangled her." I laughed, thinking it was a weird joke. She didn't laugh back. From that moment on, she made a habit of swinging by my desk. Sometimes she'd bring up obscure cases I'd barely heard of. She'd say things like, "I've always wondered how they missed the blood spatter near the closet." The way she talked, it wasn't like a fan geeking out. It was clinical. Still, I didn't think much of it. We all have our quirks. Besides, it was nice having someone to talk to. At the time, I thought she just liked the genre. I was wrong. The thing about Diana was how precise she was. She never rambled, never speculated. Everything she said sounded like it came from a police report no one else had access to. At first, I thought maybe she just read a lot. Maybe she had some background in law enforcement. Her hair was always perfect, her nails painted a glossy burgundy that matched her lipstick. She gave off a vibe like she'd seen things you hadn't. One Friday, she brought me a manila folder at lunch. "Look through this," she said, placing it on my desk like it was normal. "Tell me what you think." Inside were printed case summaries, mostly cold cases. Murders from New England over the last 2 decades. Some I recognized from podcasts, others not at all. Every page was underlined and annotated in red pen. Circles, notes, question marks. She wrote things like "too clean" and "where's the blood trail" and "strangled, not stabbed, red autopsy." "This is intense," I said. Diana tilted her head. "You don't think about what's missing in the official story?" I shrugged. "Not like this." She smiled barely. "That's the problem. No one does." That weekend I barely slept. I kept thinking about how confidently she rewrote narratives, like she wasn't guessing, like she knew. I started Googling some of the cases. Some were too obscure to be in the public record. I couldn't even find articles. Then Monday came and she didn't show up. When she returned the next day, her eyes looked brighter than usual. Energized. "Had to help a friend with something," she said. That night, the news ran a story. Cold case arrest in Revere. Woman found with evidence no one could explain. Anonymous tip led them to the scene. A matchstick was mentioned, so was the red pen. I started eating lunch in my car after that. Something about Diana wasn't adding up. I couldn't shake the way she said "strangled" that first day, or the folders, or how she never seemed to blink. I didn't know if she was a true crime fanatic or something else entirely, but I didn't want to find out. Then, one Thursday afternoon, she stopped by my desk like nothing had changed. "You still thinking about the Revere case?" she asked. I forced a laugh. "Yeah, I guess. Wild coincidence." Her mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, not if you were paying attention. I pretended to have a phone call. She walked away. An hour later, a woman in a leather jacket and sensible shoes approached my cubicle. She flashed a badge. "Detective Velez, Boston PD. Got a minute?" Ow. Stomach dropped. "Sure," I croaked. "You're friendly with Diana Cole?" she asked, tone casual but sharp. I hesitated. "Co-workers, not close." She slid a photo onto my desk. Crime scene. A dimly lit bedroom. Blood smeared across the floor. A single matchstick balanced on the edge of the nightstand. "You ever seen this before?" I looked at it too long. then shook my head. No. What's this about? Detective Velez didn't blink. You seem like a smart guy, Mr. Rivera. Be careful who you trust. When she left, I stared at the photo again. I'd seen that room before, not in person. Not on the news. It had been in Diana's folder, circled in red. That night, I blocked her number. I locked my apartment windows, which I hadn't done in months. Changed my morning route to the office. Turned off location tracking on my phone. I even told HR I needed to start working from home for health reasons. And I started applying for jobs anywhere but Boston. The next morning, Mark, our office wise ass, texted me, "Dude, Dexter just got walked out by cops. Whole floor watched." Didn't reply, I couldn't. My hands were shaking too much. The rest of the week Eversure buzzed with gossip. Someone said Diana had lied about her identity, that her real name was Danielle Reeves, that she wasn't just a suspect in one case, but 3. New Hampshire, Connecticut, and now Massachusetts. Always nearby, always watching. Her signature? A matchstick, left behind like punctuation. I kept replaying every conversation we'd had, wondering if I'd missed something, wondering if she had wanted me to see more, to test me, groom me, or maybe to confess. She'd never said anything outright, but that's what made it worse. She never had to. By Halloween, I'd quit. No notice. Just a resignation email and a cleared-out desk. Gus and I moved to a quieter part of Providence. New job, new apartment, no more true crime podcasts. I deleted them all. But the silence? It's worse. Sometimes I think I hear her voice. In it, still calm, still careful, still smiling. They called me in for a formal statement 2 weeks later. Detective Velez laid it all out. Danielle Reeves wasn't just a fan of crime. She was a name that came up in cold cases all across New England. Her aliases, her weirdly accurate details, her uncanny timing. But they had no proof, just breadcrumbs. She ever give you anything physical? Velez asked. A file? A gift? Anything? I told her no. And it was the truth. She'd only given me stories, and those stay with you longer. After that, I tried to forget. I really did. I focused on the new job, bought a second cat so Gus wouldn't be lonely. I stopped watching crime shows, stopped reading Reddit threads, started jogging, even though I hate jogging. But every now and then, I hear a case mentioned, on knees, the radio, or a headline online. A woman, dead. Details eerily familiar. No suspects, no matchstick this time. But I still wonder, did she do it, or did she just wish she had? Maybe that's what scares me the most, not knowing whether Danielle, was a killer, or just someone who got so close to the edge that she took people with her anyway, obsessed with the darkness until she became part of it, and maybe I was just lucky enough to step back in time. There's a difference, I've learned, between people who are interested in evil and people who live in it like it's a second skin. Now I double lock the door. I don't answer unknown numbers. I tell myself the silence is just peace. But sometimes I dream of her voice again, still calm, still correcting the story. And in the dream, I never wake up in time. Before Evan Park, I kept my world simple. School, work, sleep, repeat. My off-campus apartment smelled like instant ramen and old socks, and my social life was mostly pings from Discord. Between my part-time job at the campus IT desk and back-to-back CS classes, I barely had time to breathe, let alone meet new people. When Dr. Hassan emailed me about tutoring a transfer student, I almost said no, but she dropped that flattering line, "You're the top performer in class." Flattery worked, and I needed the extra cash. Evan was quiet the first time we met. Sat 2 seats behind me in algorithms, hoodie pulled up, barely spoke above a whisper. He smiled when I offered to meet after class, said he was struggling with recursion and pointers, basic stuff. We started meeting in the student lounge twice a week. At first, it felt good to explain things out loud, like I actually knew what I was doing. Evan listened closely, nodding along. He'd occasionally mutter things like, "This makes sense," or "Wish I'd met you sooner." Then came the coffee incident. He accidentally spilled his latte on his own laptop, caramel something, sticky and suspiciously well-aimed. I offered to help him dry it out, but he waved it off. "Honestly," he said, "I don't trust repair shops. Could you help me install a security backup on my new drive just to be safe?" He handed me a USB stick. Said it was loaded with software he found online. Sounded sketchy, but I said yes. I liked being needed. That's what gets you when someone makes you feel helpful. I had no idea I'd just invited something into my system I couldn't get out. At first, nothing seemed off. My laptop was just slower. I figured it was stress. Midterms were crushing everyone. But then my fan started kicking on in the middle of the night, loud, constant. I'd be lying half awake in bed, listening to it whir, assuming some background process was updating. Normal stuff. Until Maya texted me, "Why's your webcam light on?" That hit like cold water. Maya and I worked together at the IT help desk. She was sharper than me when it came to security. Paranoid even. She told me once she kept her phone in a Faraday pouch at night. I looked over at my laptop. The tiny green dot was glowing. I slammed the lid shut. That night, I tore apart my system, ran every virus scanner I could find, launched terminal, scanned logs, checked processes. Buried deep in my task manager was a file I didn't recognize. Obfuscated code, something nested in the permissions, something designed to look invisible until it wasn't. The USB. I remembered how Evan had watched me type my admin password. Said nothing, just observed. I opened my keychain. Every saved password, every autofill entry, exposed. Then I checked my browser history. Somehow, screenshots had been taken, saved, and uploaded. I followed the trail to a forum post under a thread titled, "Watch Them Squirm." There I was, changing shirts, staring blankly at the screen, clipping my nails. Alone. I shut the laptop again, but the image of myself lingered. Frozen. Violated. I didn't sleep that night. I called in sick the next day and scrubbed everything I could, changed all my passwords, taped over the webcam. The worst part? Evan didn't show up to class that day, or the next. It was like he'd never existed at all. I went straight to Dr. Hassan's office. Her expression changed when I said Evan's name. Subtle, just a flicker of confusion. "He's in your class roster, right?" I asked, voice shaky. She pulled up the list, scanned it, frowned. "There's no Evan Park here." I stared at the screen. Empty cell where his name should have been. "I assigned you to tutor." "Oh." She paused. "I must have been mistaken. Are you sure that's his name?" I left before I could start yelling. Back at the IT desk, I cornered Maya. Showed her the logs, the screenshots, the spyware trail. She didn't ask if I was sure. She just said, "You need to talk to someone higher up." She called in a favor from a friend who worked cyber forensics with the Austin PD. 2 days later, I met Detective Ruiz at a cafe off campus. Late 40s, weathered face, didn't touch his coffee. "I've seen this before," he said, flipping through my printouts. "The forum, the footage, this isn't amateur stuff." He told me the USB had launched a payload designed to clone local files and activate passive recording. Not just webcam. Keystrokes, browser history, saved credentials. All of it. "I know this code signature," he said. "We've been trying to catch this guy for over a year." He paused. "His alias is Evan Park." That wasn't his real name. Turns out he was a dropout named Daniel Keene, 22. Failed out of UT sophomore year. Vanished off the student radar. Hacked for thrills. Moved campus to campus under fake IDs. Targeting loners. Making friends. Just long enough to be let in. Ruiz sighed. "He's good, but we're getting closer." It didn't make me feel better, because by then the damage was already done. After Detective Ruiz left, I wiped everything. I mean everything. Factory reset. Burned my old hard drive. Bought a new laptop, even though I couldn't afford it. Didn't matter. I couldn't look at my old machine without seeing my own face staring back through the screen. I ghosted tutoring. Told Dr. Hassan I had personal issues. She didn't press. I stopped gaming on Discord, left every server. Maya kept checking in, asking if I was okay. I kept saying I was. I wasn't. It's not just the footage or the forum, it's what it did to my brain. I'd walk into rooms and instinctively scan for cameras. I'd flinch every time my phone buzzed. I deleted all my social media and switched to a flip phone for 2 weeks like I was living in 2004. And the worst part? A guy named Alex. Sweet, soft-spoken, sat next to me in operating systems, asked me out for coffee. I liked him. But when he touched my phone to show me a meme, I pulled away like it was fire. He gave me this hurt look like I didn't trust him. He was right. Eventually, I told him I wasn't ready to date. He nodded, said he understood. He didn't, though. Not really. Trust isn't a switch you can flip back on. Some part of me still expected Evan Daniel to message me, to say it was all a joke, that he was sorry, that it wasn't personal. But he never did. Sociopaths don't need closure. They just need access. A month passed. Then the call came. Detective Ruiz again. Voice gruffer this time, but triumphant. We got him. Daniel Keene. Picked up outside a coffee shop near Texas A&M. Another campus. Another fake name. Another USB in his pocket. Same script. Same spyware. He had 3 more victims. Ruiz said. They'd found terabytes of footage, logs, notes, like it was a hobby, an art project. Yours wasn't even the worst, he said. I felt sick. I thanked him. He offered to connect me with a campus counselor. I said maybe. I never called. Instead, I buried myself in code again. Switched to Linux. Started using air-gapped machines for anything sensitive. I even installed a webcam kill switch. I thought about pressing charges. But what would it change? The footage was still out there. Maybe buried. Maybe downloaded. Maybe just waiting to be found again. I declined Dr. Hassan's offer for extra credit. Transferred out of tutoring programs altogether. Now, I just keep my head down. Still code. Still feed Gus, my chubby cat. Still tape over my cameras. Every night before bed, I check my task manager, just in case. Because the truth is, you don't know who's watching until they stop pretending to be helpless. Not everyone who asks for help needs it. Some people just want to weigh in. And if you're not careful, you'll give them the key with a smile. I did. And now I don't smile at strangers. Not anymore. You ever notice how some friendships sneak up on you like stains? You don't realize how much they've soaked in until it's way too late. That was Lauren. We met freshman year in a dorm hallway. Me hauling boxes, her offering a bottle of cheap wine and that $1 million smile. She always had charm. That kind people mistake for warmth. I mistook it too. Every time she forgot to Venmo me or lost her debit card, I told myself, she's just scattered. She'd flash her phone case covered in glitter and say, "You're the responsible one, Maya. That's why we work." I wanted to believe it. I'm a first-gen kid with immigrant parents who think saving receipts is a form of religion. But Lauren made me feel looser, like maybe I didn't have to say no so often. When she suggested one last girls' trip before graduation, I was already fragile. I'd just lost my unpaid internship and found out Sally Mae wanted blood. She said she'd found a hidden gem of a motel on the coast. I should have known better. The sea view looked like a set from a movie about people who never get found. The lights flickered when we checked in. The heater wheezed like it was dying. And the motel clerk? He had yellow fingernails and looked at Lauren like he knew something, but I smiled. I always smiled. Because when someone's been your best friend for 4 years, you don't accuse them of anything. Not out loud. You just ignore the way your gut tightens when she says, "Let's not use phones this trip. Detox, you know?" And when she books a separate room, you say okay, even though it feels wrong. It was cold that night. Colder than I expected for coastal Oregon. My blanket smelled like mildew and my phone buzzed for signal like it was gasping. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the heater rattle like it was telling secrets. I should have been sleeping. Instead, I kept replaying the weirdness. Lauren driving separately, her eyes darting when the clerk handed her the keys. Priya laughing too loud at dinner, probably nervous. Jenna didn't laugh. She just watched Lauren like she didn't trust a damn thing. At 12:03 a.m. I heard coughing, then a choking sound. I got up, feet freezing on the linoleum, and knocked on Priya and Jenna's door. No answer. At 12:10 I tried. The handle. It was unlocked. The lights inside flickered low. The beds were rumpled, Priya's side empty. Jenna was in the bathroom. Her throat was open, wide and red and already still. Lauren was on the floor nearby, sprawled like she'd fainted. At 12:17 I screamed. Lauren blinked awake too fast. What happened? She asked, voice shaky, too practiced. I ran for my phone, fumbling the passcode. 911. I barely had a signal. Then her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. No blood on her sleeves. You were always too nice to check the fine print, she whispered. And that was when I finally saw her. Not the friend. Not the girl who borrowed my sweaters and forgot rent. The girl who took out a life insurance policy in my name 3 weeks ago. It wasn't adrenaline. It was betrayal. I broke the mirror on the sink with the back of my elbow. The glass shattered slow, like in a dream. Lauren lunged, and I swung a shard across her arm, opening a line of blood that surprised even her. She screamed, less pain than shock. I ran. The hallway light stuttered as I grabbed my coat and bolted out the side door. My boot slipped on the wet pavement. Somewhere behind me she was laughing, not the cackle kind of laugh, the low, steady, I've already won laugh. Sprinted toward the trees behind the motel. The redwoods swallowed the sky. The cold punched through my lungs. My breath turned white. There was a rustling behind the dumpster. That's where I found him, the motel clerk. His body folded, eyes open, mouth half parted. I stumbled backward, almost slipping again. Lauren's car was gone. Her room stripped, clean. No Jenna, no Priya, no friends anymore. I reached a service road and waved down a delivery truck. The driver was young and panicked at the sight of blood. I climbed in, still clutching the mirror shard. That's how I survived. By running. By believing my fear finally, instead of talking it down like I always had. Later, when the police showed up, I told them everything. They didn't believe all of it. But the insurance forms, the fake loans, her search history, that convinced them. She hadn't just wanted me dead. She wanted me gone with profit. It took weeks before I could speak without shaking. Lauren disappeared. Her laptop left behind in a rush told the real story. Searches for how to make murder look like suicide, how to destroy fingerprints, and Oregon State life insurance timelines. Jenna and Priya were found 2 days later. Their bodies staged like lovers gone wrong. The note was typed, but Jenna always wrote in block letters. Priya doodled on everything. The cops noticed. Still, Lauren was gone. Just gone. The motel clerk had been in on it. Probably for a cut of the insurance. Or maybe just loyalty to a girl who lied well. My name was on 3 student loans I hadn't applied for. The accounts were linked to old group photos and forged emails. No one warns you how slow justice moves when your villain is charming and white and missing. I moved back in with my parents. Deleted all my social media. Changed banks. Sometimes when I sleep, I hear the heater rattling. Sometimes I hear her laugh. I don't think she'll come back, but if she does, I'll be ready. Because now I understand something I didn't before. There's friendship and there's ownership. Lauren always knew the difference. I didn't. At the memorial for Jenna and Priya, someone asked me what Lauren was really like. I didn't know how to answer. So I pulled out my phone. Scrolled to the folder labeled Evidence. I showed them the bank statements, the loan approvals, the photo of Lauren holding my ID and grinning. The detective called it financial predation. I call it friendship with a knife. I didn't get to graduate with my class. My GPA tanked from trauma, but I got out. That trip? That was never a vacation. It was a countdown. Lauren had been planning it since sophomore year, when she first started borrowing money, when she charmed Priya. When she told Jenna to relax, she made me trust her so I wouldn't notice the cuts until they were too deep. My mistake wasn't being too nice, it was not believing someone like her could exist. Now I know better. Real friends don't keep you in debt. They don't need secrets to feel powerful. If someone makes you feel guilty for helping them, check if they're helping you back. Protect your name, your accounts, and your instincts. And if a friendship ever feels more like a trap than a bond, cut the rope before they pull tighter. I used to think horror stories only happened to other people. The kind of people who lived near old woods or messed with Ouija boards or ignored the warnings in movies. But it turns out they can happen in Spanish class. On a gray Tuesday in late February, when your life already feels like it's falling apart. That's when Liam Vaughn showed up. I was sitting near the back like always, trying not to draw attention to myself. Ms. Alvarez was writing something on the board about verb conjugations when he walked in. Tall, pale, hunched like he didn't want to be noticed. But he was hard to ignore. He looked worn down, dark, circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept in weeks. His clothes were clean but faded, like they'd been washed too many times. "This is Liam," Ms. Alvarez said. "He's just moved here from Seattle. Make him feel welcome." Liam nodded. Once, no smile, no wave. He took the empty desk next to me without a word. Most kids didn't seem to care, but I glanced at him. He didn't meet my eyes. "Seattle, huh?" I said quietly. He looked at me, then out the window. "Family stuff," he answered. I didn't push. I knew that tone. Vague, tired, closed off. It's the tone I use when people ask about my parents, about Ryan, about why I never hang out after school anymore. Still, I found myself watching him during class. He never took notes. Just stared straight ahead. His bag looked empty. No lunch, no phone, nothing. Like he didn't plan on staying long. At first I figured he was just shy. Now I think he was something else entirely. By the second week I'd started drawing Liam. Not like obsessively. Just little sketches in the margins of my notebook. His posture. The way his bangs fell in front of his eyes, how he always sat too still. I told myself it was just habit. I draw what I see, but what I saw didn't always make sense. He never ate lunch, not once. While everyone else rushed to the cafeteria or hung out behind the gym, Liam just disappeared. No one ever saw him leave. He'd just vanish during the break and show up again right when the bell rang, slipping into class like a ghost. He'd say things that didn't add up too. One time we were walking to fourth period and he said, "You were up late drawing last night, the window light was on." I froze. My bedroom window faced the backyard. No one could see in from the street. "Were you near my house?" I asked. He gave me this half smile like it was a joke. "Just a guess." I told Ryan about it the next day. We weren't friends anymore, not since he started hanging out with the soccer guys and ignoring me, but he still gave me these pitying looks sometimes. I guess I wanted to see if he'd finally believe me about something. "Dude," he said laughing, "that guy's creepy. Stop talking to him." But I didn't. There was something about Liam that felt familiar, like we both didn't fit in, like we both were just trying to survive high school without drowning. I thought maybe he was like, but late one night I woke up for water and glanced out my window, and I saw him standing under the pine tree in my backyard, watching. Then he was gone. On a Monday morning in early March, Liam didn't show up to class. At first I thought maybe he was sick, or finally tired of pretending to care about Spanish verbs. But Ms. Alvarez kept glancing at his empty desk like something was off. "Did Liam mention transferring?" she asked me as we were leaving. "No," I said, frowning. "Why?" She didn't answer. That afternoon I went to the office. I don't know why. I just had this pit in my stomach, like something was wrong and I had to prove it wasn't. I asked the secretary if Liam had dropped out or something. She typed for a moment, then looked up. "We don't have any student by that name." I stared at her. Liam Vaughn, tall, pale, transferred from Seattle. Third period Spanish. She shook her head. "There's no one by that name in our system." Back home, I searched his Instagram. Again. He had one picture, blurry and black and white, of a river or lake. No posts, no followers, just that one photo. I downloaded it and ran it through a reverse image search. That's when I found the missing persons report. A boy named Caleb Meyer, age 13, vanished from a family camping trip in Washington. The photo in the report, it was identical to Liam's profile picture. Same face, same dark eyes. But it said he'd been missing for 3 years. I reread the caption below the photo. "If you have any information, contact local authorities." I did. And that's how I ended up talking to Detective Hale. Detective Hale met me at a Starbucks of all places. I guess they figured I'd be more comfortable in public, like I wasn't already spiraling. He listened while I told him everything. Liam's weird habits the night I saw him outside, the photo, the lack of school records. I expected him to dismiss it all. Instead, he sighed. "You're not the first to mention a kid like this," he said. "What do you mean?" He pulled out a manila folder. Inside was the same missing persons flyer I'd found. Caleb Meyer. This kid disappeared near Mount Rainier 3 years ago. Family trip. Never found a body, but he was presumed dead last year. But he was here, I insisted. He sat next to me in class. I talked to him. "We checked," Hale said. "No enrollment, no address, no paper trail." He looked tired. "We don't know who you met, but it wasn't Caleb. Or at least it wasn't the Caleb who vanished." "What does that mean?" He didn't answer. After that, I stopped looking for answers. Some things don't make sense no matter how long you stare at them. I told Ms. Alvarez I wanted to switch out of Spanish. I avoided the hallways where Liam used to walk. I went home and locked my window every night, even if it was warm. I stopped drawing, stopped writing, stopped sleeping well. I thought about asking Ryan if he remembered Liam, but I was scared he'd say no. Scared I was the only one who ever saw him, and maybe I was. The rain started again in late March, thick and endless. Portland's signature weather, soaks your clothes and blurs the world around you. Some nights I still dream about Liam. In the dream, I'm back in Spanish class. Ms. Alvarez is talking, but her mouth moves wrong like a puppet. And Liam is there in the same seat grinning at me. His eyes are black, not angry, just empty. Sometimes in those dreams I follow him, through the woods, into the water. I always wake up before I drown. Ryan tried to talk to me last week. He caught me in the hallway, said he was sorry for how things ended, that he should have said something sooner. I didn't know what to say. He meant well. But some cracks don't seal up again. There's this part of me that still wonders if Liam was ever real. If I made him up out of loneliness. If grief or stress or whatever cracked something in my brain. My parents barely speak now. My house is a quiet war zone. Maybe Liam was just what happened when things finally got too quiet. But then I think about that picture, that name, that missing boy who never came home. And I know what I saw. I know what I talked to. Whatever. Liam was ghost, echo, shadow. I don't think he was looking for a friend. I think he was looking for someone to follow him back. I used to think the hardest part of my 20s would be figuring out a career, maybe paying rent on time or dealing with student loans. Nobody warns you that sometimes the hardest part is learning how to walk away from people you thought you couldn't live without. Back in March of 2014, I packed up my life in Milwaukee into the trunk of a silver Honda Civic that rattled every time it went over 40. I had 2 battered suitcases, a guitar I hadn't played in months, and a stack of sketchbooks stuffed with half-finished watercolors. I told myself I was driving toward a clean slate, though in truth I was running from my parents' crumbling marriage, from an ex who left more bruises on my spirit than my skin, and from the version of myself that kept shrinking to fit into other people's expectations. The drive to Portland, Maine took me nearly 2 days. I remember pulling into the city late on a Sunday afternoon, the Atlantic air colder and sharper than the Midwest wind I was used to. The sun was setting behind rows of old brick buildings, and the streets smelled faintly of salt and coffee. I found the attic apartment I'd rented on Congress Street. It was small, barely enough room for a bed and a folding table I used as a desk, but it had a slanted window that looked out over the harbor. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The first weeks felt like freedom disguised as routine. In the mornings, I'd take my sketchbook down to a little cafe on the corner, order a cheap black coffee, and sketch the fishermen unloading crates or the tourists wandering by with cameras. At night, I worked shifts at a seafood diner by the water. The work was exhausting, running plates of fried clams to tables of families on vacation. But I liked the noise. It reminded me that life could be messy and loud without being dangerous. I had promised myself I'd keep things simple. No dating, no letting anyone too close, no more men who made me feel small. I even wrote it down on a sticky note and taped it above my desk. No more men who make me smaller. Then I met Julian. He was sitting outside the cafe one morning in April, strumming his guitar like he had all the time in the world. His case sat open at his feet with a handful of coins inside. He wasn't the kind of man who demanded your attention, but people couldn't help slowing down as they passed. Something about the way his fingers moved over the strings made you feel like the song was just for you. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked me, nodding toward the chair across from mine. I glanced at my sketchbook, then back at him. His dark hair was a little too long, falling into his eyes, and he had a smile that came easy. I shrugged. "It's a free table." He slid into the chair with a kind of ease I envied. "Drawing. What do you sketch?" "I've seen you here before," he said. "Always, whatever doesn't move too fast," I said, closing the cover of my book. "Mostly people." "People, huh?" His grin widened. "Think you could capture me?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Maybe. But you'd have to hold still, and I doubt you're good at that." That was the beginning. We talked until my coffee went cold about music and art and how Portland felt like a town built for second chances. He told me he was 29, originally from Boston, and made a living playing gigs at local bars. When I got up to leave for my shift, he stood too, slinging his guitar over his shoulder. "See you around, Clara," he said, like he already knew we would. And of course we did. Every morning after that, Julian seemed to be at the cafe, waving me over like we were old friends. At first it felt like fate, like maybe moving halfway across the country hadn't been running away, but running toward something new. Back then, I didn't see the shadows. I only saw the sunlight streaming through his smile. Julian had a way of making the world feel smaller in the beginning, but in a good way. My mornings weren't just mine anymore. They were ours. We'd sit together on the patio outside the cafe, me with my sketchbook, him with his guitar, trading stories about the people who passed by. He'd nudge me, pointing at a couple bickering on the sidewalk. "Bet they're arguing about dinner," he'd whisper. I'd grin, adding quickly to my sketch. Or maybe he forgot their anniversary. It felt easy. He listened in a way few people ever had. He asked about my art, my family, even about the breakup I still carried like an invisible bruise. When I told him I wasn't sure I wanted to talk about it, he didn't press. Instead, he strummed a slow tune and said, "Then we'll just sit with the silence." It was hard not to be drawn to that kind of gentleness. By early summer, we were seeing each other nearly every day. He'd show up at the diner just as my shift ended, leaning against the lamppost with that lazy smile, strumming a tune under the streetlight. My co-workers teased me about the mystery musician boyfriend, and I'd blush telling them it wasn't that serious. But it was. One night, after we walked along the pier, Julian brushed a strand of hair behind my ear and said, "You know, you're the only person I feel like I can really breathe around." The words cracked something open inside me. I'd been carrying so much guilt and shame from my past that hearing someone say I mattered, that I was different, felt like a balm. But small signs started slipping through, and I ignored them at first. One evening after my shift, I found him outside, hands stuffed in his pockets. "Enough," he said lightly, though his eyes darted toward the door. "Took you long." "I had to close out," I explained, tugging my bag higher on my shoulder. "Sure, but I saw one of those drunk guys talking to you. What did he want?" "Nothing. He was asking about the menu. He's harmless." Julian nodded, but his jaw tightened. "Boundaries." "Just making sure. Guys like that don't respect." I brushed it off. Maybe he was just being protective. Maybe after what I'd been through before, I secretly liked the idea of someone caring that much. By July, he'd started showing up at my apartment more often, sometimes unannounced. He'd bring groceries or flowers, saying he wanted to take care of me. It was sweet, until it wasn't. One night I was FaceTiming my younger sister Emily. We were laughing about something dumb from childhood when Julian walked in. He sat down next to me, arms folded. After I hung up, he said quietly, "Why do you waste so much energy on her? She never supported you." "She's my sister," and I said, "I don't need her to agree with everything I do." He shrugged but kept staring at me. "People like her hold you back." I told myself he didn't mean it, that maybe he was just tired. But the next time Emily called, I hesitated to pick up, hearing his words in my head. That was the start of it. Little by little, my world revolved around him. And at the time, I thought that was what love was supposed to look like. Autumn rolled into Portland with brisk winds and orange leaves scattered across the cobblestones. My art had taken a back seat by then. Most of my sketchbooks sat unopened, gathering dust in a corner of the apartment. Julian insisted we spend more time together, and whenever I tried to pull out my paints, he'd say, "You're wasting your talent on scribbles. Why not paint me something that matters?" I'd laugh it off, but I stopped trying after a while. The first real crack appeared one morning when my landlord, Mr. Peterson, knocked on the door about a leaky pipe. I answered, hair messy, still in my pajamas. We talked briefly in the hallway, nothing serious. That's when Julian appeared, stepping between us so quickly I almost stumbled back. "What's going on here?" he asked sharply. "Just reminding her about the plumbing," Mr. Peterson said, raising his eyebrows. Julian's hand found my wrist, gripping it just a little too tightly as he leaned down and whispered, "Why are you smiling at him like that?" I froze. My landlord looked at me, confused, then nodded politely and left. When the door shut, I pulled my arm back. "Julian, what the hell?" "I don't like the way he looks at you," he said, voice low. He wasn't looking at me. He was talking about pipes. Julian's expression softened instantly. "Hey, I'm sorry, I love you too much to lose you." He kissed my forehead, and for some reason, the apology felt heavier than the accusation. That's how it went. Every time he crossed a line, he followed it with tenderness, like a bandage on a wound he created. And I kept convincing myself the bandage was enough. By winter, I'd quit my job at the diner. Julian insisted he could cover the bills with his gigs. "Exhaust yourself serving people who don't matter," he'd said. "Focus on us. On me." Why I tried selling sketches online in secret just to keep a piece of myself alive. But even that felt risky. He had a way of picking up my phone, scrolling through it under the pretense of keeping distractions away. One night he deleted a contact without telling me. "Who was that?" I asked when I noticed. "Doesn't matter," he said calmly. "Someone you don't need." And just like that, my circle grew smaller. Friends drifted away when I stopped returning calls. Emily texted less often. My paints dried up in their jars. The scariest part wasn't how much I lost. It was how natural it started to feel. December 2015 arrived with snow blanketing the streets and a tension in the air I couldn't shake. One afternoon I received an email from a gallery I'd applied to months earlier. They'd accepted one of my watercolors for their New Year's Eve exhibition. For the first time in over a year, I felt something spark inside me. When I told Julian, he smiled too wide. "Galleries can be brutal." "That's great, babe. But are you sure you're ready?" "I just want to try," I said firmly. The night of the exhibition, I dressed carefully, slipping on a dress I hadn't worn since before I met him. My hands shook as I buttoned it. This felt like more than an art show. It felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. But when I arrived, Julian was waiting outside, gripping my old sketchbook in his hand. "What are you doing here?" I asked. He leaned in close, his voice a sharp whisper. "You'd embarrass yourself without me. You need me." I felt the world tilt, his words sinking like stones into my chest. People passed us, glancing curiously, but no one stopped. For the first time, I didn't argue. I just stepped back, walked inside, and turned off my phone. That night, I slept on a friend's couch, trembling but resolute. I knew something had broken beyond repair. The aftermath wasn't clean. Julian flooded my inbox with apologies, with recordings of songs he wrote just for me. Then the sweetness turned to bitterness. "If you leave me, you'll regret it." With help from my gallery friend, I filed for a restraining order. The police said they couldn't do much unless he broke it. For weeks, I flinched at shadows outside my window, convinced I saw his figure under the streetlight. In time, I moved again, this time to Boston. I taught art to kids in a community center, rediscovering the joy of painting through their laughter. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. Even now, years later, whenever I pass a street musician strumming a guitar, my chest tightens. I remember how warmth can disguise itself as chains. Love should never cost you your freedom. The most dangerous influences don't always begin with cruelty. They begin with kindness, with someone who makes you feel chosen, only to slowly close the walls around you. Real love gives you room to grow, not reasons to shrink. I used to think I understood what independence meant. Growing up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, I spent most of my teenage years watching the same mountains roll past the car windows, the same quiet streets where everyone knew each other's business. My mom raised me and my younger brother alone after Dad left when I was 9. She worked double shifts as a nurse, and I picked up a camera for the first time when I was 12, one my grandfather had left me when he passed away. Photography became my way of seeing the world differently, catching the light falling through trees, or the expression on someone's face when they didn't know they were being seen. By the time I turned 18, I was restless. Chattanooga felt too small, too predictable. I wanted something bigger, a place where people didn't already know who I was, or what I'd been through. That's why I chose Northbridge University in Boston. It wasn't just about school. It was about escape, about testing whether I could really stand on my own. Before I left, my mom hugged me so tightly I thought I'd lose my breath. "Maya," she said, looking me straight in the eye, "promise me you'll stay focused. No distractions." I promised, and I meant it. But promises have a way of unraveling in the noise of a new life. The first weeks in Boston felt like stepping into another universe. The streets were alive in a way Chattanooga never was. Horns honking, people rushing past with coffee cups, languages I'd never heard back home. My dorm room was cramped, shared with a girl named Jenna, who painted abstract canvases late into the night. I tried to carve out space for myself by hanging my photos on the walls, but still, I felt like a small fish thrown into an ocean. I wanted to belong. That's what led me to the rooftop party one sticky night in late August. The view stretched across the city, lights glittering like stars dropped onto the streets below. Music pulsed through portable speakers, people laughing, shouting over one another. I kept my camera slung over my shoulder, more like a shield than an accessory. That's when Ethan found me. He walked right up as if we'd known each other for years. "Look mysterious?" he asked, nodding toward my camera. "You a photographer or just trying to?" I smiled nervously. A little of both, maybe. "I'm Ethan," he said, holding out his hand with the confidence of someone who expected the world to take it. He was 20, a junior, and within 10 minutes, he'd introduced me to half the crowd on that rooftop. He had a way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the room, even with 20 other conversations happening around you. That night, I walked back to my dorm thinking maybe Boston wouldn't feel so lonely after all. Ethan's charm didn't take long to weave into my daily routine. He'd text me every morning before my alarm went off. "Good luck in class today, beautiful." He started waiting outside my lectures, walking me across campus like it was his responsibility. When I stayed late at the library, he'd show up with coffee, sliding it across the table with a grin. At first, I told myself it was what every girl wanted, someone who cared enough to be there, someone who noticed the details. But by October, the attention started feeling heavier than I expected. One night, I was working on a photo assignment in the dorm lounge when my phone buzzed. "Ethan, why aren't you answering?" I had 3 missed calls already. I texted back, "Just working." His reply came instantly, "Who are you with?" When I didn't respond within 5 minutes, the calls started again. By the time I got back to my room, Ethan was waiting outside the building. "Why didn't you pick up?" he demanded. "I told you, I was working." "With who?" His eyes narrowed, and I realized this wasn't about worry. This was about control. I brushed it off, telling myself he just cared too much. But the questions kept coming, and the more I explained, the less he believed me. The isolation crept in slowly, almost invisibly. My roommate invited me to an art gallery in the city one weekend, and I said yes. But when Ethan heard, he frowned. "You'd rather hang out with her than with me?" "It's just an art show," I said. "I don't like the way she looks at me," he muttered. "Stay here with me." I canceled. It was easier than fighting. On Instagram, I posted a group photo from a dorm movie night. Ethan messaged me minutes later. "Why is that guy standing so close to you?" I started second-guessing every post, every outing, until eventually I stopped going altogether. My world shrank to the size of Ethan's approval. The worst night came in November. A few friends gathered in the dorm to play Truth or Dare, harmless fun, just laughter and teasing. When it was Ethan's turn, he dared me to kiss another student on the cheek. Everyone laughed, expecting me to brush it off, but I leaned forward nervously and gave the quickest peck imaginable. The room cheered. Ethan didn't. He dragged me into my room, slammed the door, and his voice shook with rage. Me in front of them. "You humiliated," I tried to explain, but he shoved me onto the bed and pulled a pocket knife from his jeans. He didn't press it against me. He didn't have to. The glint of the blade under the dim light was enough. "Never disrespect me again," he whispered. My body froze, fear spreading like ice through my veins. A knock on the door broke the silence. "Maya? You okay?" It was Talia, one of the girls from the gathering. I managed to push the door open just enough for her to see inside. Her eyes widened when she spotted the knife, and without hesitation she yanked me out, slamming the door shut behind us. Campus security was called. Ethan disappeared into the night before they arrived. I wish I could say I pressed charges right then, that I stood tall and refused to let fear swallow me. But fear has a way of silencing you. I told the police I didn't want to move forward, terrified of retaliation, terrified of being labeled dramatic or unstable. Instead, I requested a dorm transfer, deleted my social media, and tried to disappear. Ethan didn't let go easily. He spread rumors through mutual friends, saying I was unstable, overreacting, that I made the whole thing up. Whispers followed me down hallways, and even when people smiled at me, I wondered what they'd heard. By spring semester, I found refuge in the photography club. The dark room became a sanctuary, the smell of chemicals oddly comforting as my images developed slowly in trays of liquid. I showcased my work in a small campus exhibit, standing in the back of the room, trying not to shake. For a moment, I felt seen for something other than my scars. Still, the scars were there. I jumped at raised voices. I hesitated when new classmates wanted to get close, and late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I scrolled through the untouched folder of photos from that year. Among them was one from that rooftop party, the night I met Ethan. His smile glowed under string lights. Mine was shy but wide. and together we looked like the start of something beautiful. Now, whenever I see that picture, I remember the truth. Sometimes the brightest smiles hide the darkest intentions. Love and care should never come with fear attached. What feels like protection can be control in disguise, and what feels flattering at first can turn into a cage. Real love doesn't silence you, isolate you, or make you question your worth. Real love gives you space to grow, not reasons to shrink. I used to believe that starting over meant you could leave everything behind. The heartbreak, the regrets, the mess you made of things. At 25, after a breakup that had me questioning whether I even knew myself anymore, I packed up what little I owned and left Leeds for Sheffield. I told myself a new city would be the clean slate I needed, that the past wouldn't follow me there. The breakup had been ugly, the kind that strips away more than love. It takes your confidence, your plans, your sense of direction. I'd been with Ella for nearly 5 years. We met young, and in my head, that meant forever. When it ended, it felt like someone had ripped up the map I'd been living by. I was working part-time at a print shop, barely scraping rent, telling people I was saving for a photography course I might never afford. Most nights I just sat in my room scrolling through old pictures, wondering where I went wrong. That's when I saw the ad. Division Street, city center, decent rent, 2 bedrooms. I couldn't afford a place on my own, so the idea of splitting costs with a stranger didn't seem so bad. The man who answered the door that first day was Lucas Price. He was 27, a little older than me, with neat hair, pressed shirts, and a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He walked me through the flat like he was giving a tour of a museum, pointing out house rules in a clipped voice. Shoes off at the door, kitchen clean by 9, bathroom use scheduled in the mornings. I told myself he was just organized. After Ella, I figured a little order might be good for me. I signed the lease that week. At first, living with Lucas wasn't unbearable. He kept to himself most of the time, cooked bland meals in silence, and retreated to his room by 10. But there was something about his presence that felt heavy. He rarely looked me in the eye, and when he did, it was brief, like he was cataloging something. When he spoke, it was short, precise sentences. You left the kettle handle wet again. The trash goes out on Thursdays. It wasn't rude exactly, just cold, like I was more an intruder than a flatmate. I brushed it off. I'd been through worse. A quiet roommate was still better than endless arguments and slammed doors. At least that's what I thought. By October, the little things started nagging at me. I'd come home from work and notice my bedroom door slightly open, even though I always locked it. My camera tripod would be leaning against the wall, though I hadn't touched it in weeks. A photo of me and my sister, one of the few personal things I'd unpacked, was shifted off center on the dresser. One evening over takeout, I tried to bring it up casually. Weird question, but have you been in my room? Lucas didn't look up from his noodles. Why would I go in your room? It just seemed like stuff's been moved around. He smiled faintly, like I'd said something amusing. Maybe you're just forgetful. The way he said it, calm, almost patronizing, made me doubt myself for a second. I told myself it was stress, that maybe I wasn't locking the door as carefully as I thought. But the feeling of being watched never left me. When Sophie came into my life, that feeling got sharper. I met her at the print shop. She was a regular, always bringing in rolls of film from an old point-and-shoot camera. She laughed easily, asked me about my photos, and before long we were grabbing coffee after work. The first time she came over, Lucas was sitting in the living room with a book open on his lap. He didn't look up when we walked in, but every few seconds I caught his eyes flicking toward us. Later, as Sophie and I were leaving, she leaned close and whispered, "Chills. It's like he's memorizing us." "Your roommate gives me?" I laughed it off, embarrassed. "He's just socially awkward." But I felt it too. By November, the weight of his presence was grinding me down. If I stayed out late, Lucas would text me, "Where are you? Do you know what time it is?" Like he was my father. If I mentioned applying for a photography course, he'd scoff. Waste of money. You'll end up failing like the rest. At first I tried to shake it off, but the words sank in deeper than I wanted to admit. It was easier to stop applying, to stop talking about dreams that felt fragile. The night that changed everything started around 2 in the morning. I woke to the sound of floorboards creaking. My heart thumped in my chest as I stared at the dark ceiling. Through the crack under my bedroom door, I saw the faint shadow of movement. The doorknob rattled once, slowly, then again. Adrenaline shot through me. I grabbed a heavy book from the nightstand and yanked the door open. Lucas stood there, blank-faced, as if he'd just been caught wandering. "I thought I heard something," he said flatly, then turned and walked back to his room. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I started planning my exit after that. I scrolled through rental ads on my phone at work, made excuses to stay at Sophie's. When I finally told Lucas I was moving, something in his face shifted. For the first time since I'd known him, the mask cracked. "People always leave," he muttered, staring at my half-packed boxes. "You'll regret this." The way he said it made my stomach turn. On my final night, as I double-checked my luggage, I realized my SD card was missing, the one with months of photos. Panic set in. While Lucas was out, I slipped into his room. Everything was painfully neat until I found a small box under the bed. Inside were dozens of photos, not landscapes, not strangers. Me. Sleeping, brushing my teeth, eating breakfast. Sophie, too. Pictures of her outside the shop, walking home, captured without her knowing. My hands shook as I shoved the box back. I didn't take the card. I just grabbed my bag and left for Sophie's, locking the door behind me. The next morning, I returned with 2 friends to collect the rest of my things. Lucas stood in the doorway, smiling faintly, like nothing had happened. "You'll miss how safe it was here," he said. I didn't reply. I didn't even look back. Later, I learned I wasn't the first. A former tenant messaged me after I posted online about looking for a new place. "Lucas?" she wrote. "I lasted 3 months, same stuff, always watching, always around." No one had ever pressed charges. There was never enough proof, never enough to pin him down. But I didn't need a court record to know what he was. Years later, I still lock my doors twice, sometimes 3 times. I keep my blinds shut at night. I tell myself I'm cautious now, not paranoid. But sometimes I wonder if there's a difference. What I know for sure is this: bad influences don't always arrive as obvious threats. Sometimes they come as the quiet roommate, the colleague, the friend of a friend. And by the time you notice what they really are, they've already been watching too long. Not every bad influence announces itself loudly. Sometimes it's the quiet, subtle erosion of your boundaries, the roommate who makes you doubt your memory, the friend who chips away at your confidence, the partner who cloaks control in concern. The lesson I learned is simple but sharp. Trust the discomfort you feel. It's there to protect you. Boundaries are not selfish, they're survival. It's strange, the things you remember when you're older and looking back. For me, it isn't the big moments that stand out from that summer of 2012. It's small, ordinary details, the sound of cicadas rattling in the Georgia heat, the way the golden retriever's nails clicked across polished hardwood floors, or how the air inside that house always smelled faintly of peppermint toothpaste. I was 23 then, freshly graduated, unmoored, and in no mood to return to my parents' house in North Carolina, where they were busy tearing each other apart after 25 years of marriage. I thought a house-sitting job would give me a breather. A few weeks of quiet, time to sketch, time to figure out what came next. The ad came through a friend of a friend connection. A dentist named Dr. Thomas Whitaker needed someone to watch his home in Savannah while he traveled through Europe. He offered generous pay, more than I'd ever been offered for any part-time gig. There was a dog to look after, some plants to water, and not much else. When I first stepped inside his house, I felt small. The ceilings stretched tall, the floors gleamed, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a magazine. There were framed diplomas on the wall, certificates with golden seals, and bookcases crammed with journals and hardcovers. And then there was Charlie, the golden retriever. He was older, with a little white around his muzzle, but he greeted me with such warmth that I instantly felt less like an intruder and more like a guest. The first week went as smoothly as I could have hoped. I walked Charlie every morning along the quiet streets shaded by moss-draped oaks. I ate simple meals, read on the porch, and sometimes sat at the kitchen table sketching in my notebook. For a while, I almost convinced myself that I could stay like that forever. The silence felt healing, a kind of salve for the chaos I'd left behind. But silence, I would soon learn, has its own way of turning sinister. The trouble started in the second week. It was a sticky afternoon, the kind where sweat clung to your back no matter how still you sat. I was in the living room flipping through one of the heavy medical journals Thomas had left out when the doorbell rang. Charlie barked and bounded to the front door. I opened it cautiously, and there she was, a woman, maybe late 30s, with dark hair pulled back too tightly and eyes that darted in quick, restless movements. "Is Thomas here?" she asked. Her voice was sharp, carrying an edge that made my stomach tighten. "He's away," I explained. "I'm just house-sitting." She tilted her head and studied me like I'd just fed her a ridiculous lie. "No," she said flatly. "You're covering for him. He's here. Tell him Angela's not going anywhere." Before I could respond, Charlie growled, a low rumble deep in his chest. She flinched, muttered something under her breath, and stormed off. I closed the door quickly, heart racing. At first, I chalked it up to a bitter ex or maybe a pushy patient. Dentists probably saw their share of odd characters. But the unease stuck with me. That night, I replayed the conversation in my head until the sound of Charlie's steady breathing finally lulled me to sleep. The next day it happened again. A knock at noon. Angela demanding to see Thomas. Her voice less angry, more desperate. I told her again that he was gone, but she didn't believe me. This time she leaned in close to the glass and hissed, "You're lying, don't cover for him." When she finally left, I locked the door, slid the chain, and stood in the hallway for a long time, palms clammy. I considered calling Thomas, but the idea felt silly. He was halfway across the world. Besides, maybe Angela would get tired of showing up. But she didn't. The phone calls began a few days later. At first, just once a day, my cell ringing with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, silence. When I didn't, static filled the voicemail box. I tried to ignore it, but my nerves grew tighter with every buzz of my phone. Then, one evening, I stepped outside to water the flowers and noticed the back gate swinging open. I always latched it, always. The latch wasn't broken, but it hung loose as though someone had deliberately opened it. Charlie barked furiously until I pulled him back inside. That night, I finally emailed Thomas. I explained everything, the woman at the door, the calls, the open gate. His reply came hours later, short and dismissive. "Angela is unstable but harmless. Don't worry. If it makes you feel better, I'll double your pay if you stick it out." The money was tempting. I didn't have much saved, and the idea of returning home with my parents still at war was unbearable. So I told myself I could handle it. I'd lock the doors, keep the blinds drawn, and wait it out. But Angela didn't stop. If anything, she got bolder. One humid night, long after sunset, she showed up again. This time she wasn't screaming. Her voice was soft, almost pleading, when she pressed her face to the glass door and begged, "Let me in, please. You don't understand. I need to save you." Charlie barked until his throat went hoarse. I stood frozen in the hallway, the weight of her words pressing on me. Save me? From what? From whom? When she finally left, muttering to herself, the silence that followed was worse than the noise. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I crept into Thomas's study and pulled open drawers, something I hadn't dared to do before. That's when I found them. Letters, folded and stuffed deep into the back. Letters addressed to women I'd never heard of. Letters dripping with lines like, "You're nothing without me." My skin prickled as I stuffed them back where I found them, For the first time, I wondered if Angela wasn't the problem. By late July, I was counting the days until Thomas's return. I fantasized about handing him the keys, collecting my pay, and leaving that house behind. When the morning finally came, I packed my things neatly, even folded the sheets on the bed, eager to be done. He arrived in the evening, tall and sharply dressed despite the heat, his smile practiced but not warm. I expected gratitude. Instead, his eyes swept the house as though he'd left a trap and was checking whether it had been sprung. "Everything in order?" he asked casually, setting down his suitcase. "Yes," I said, trying to sound confident. "Were phone calls. I thought you should know." Though a woman, Angela, kept coming by. And there, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. It. Then his eyes fixed on me and his tone shifted. "Did you?" Angela exaggerates. She likes to stir trouble. "I'll handle." "You didn't open any of my private drawers," the way he asked it, flat and direct, sent a chill through me. "No," I lied quickly. His stare lingered a moment too long before he finally handed me an envelope of cash. "Thank you," he said curtly, as though dismissing an employee. I left that night, more relieved than grateful. Weeks later, back in my tiny apartment, I ran into a mutual acquaintance who'd grown up in Savannah. We fell into small talk, and when I mentioned I'd house sat for Thomas Whitaker, her expression changed instantly. She lowered her voice and said, "You know about him, right?" I shook my head. "He had a patient, Angela. She filed a harassment complaint against him a while back. It got settled quietly, but people talk." The conversation stuck in my chest like a splinter. Suddenly, everything fit together. The warnings, the desperate knocking, the letters, his coldness when he came home. I realized then how close I'd been to believing his version of things, dismissing Angela as unstable like he wanted me to. Even now, years later, I can still hear Charlie's growl, that instinctive rumble every time she approached. Funny how the dog seemed to understand something I hadn't. He'd been my only shield in that house. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if I'd let Angela inside. Or worse, if I'd trusted Thomas too much, let myself get drawn into his polished smile and practiced reassurances. Evil doesn't always come crashing through the door in the form of a stranger. Sometimes it wears a white coat, signs checks, and pretends to be respectable. The most dangerous influence is often the one that convinces you their chaos is none of your concern, until it becomes yours. Some people look back on their teenage years as a blur of freedom, driving late into the night with friends, football games, homecoming dances. My memories were different. By 19, my life was more responsibility than rebellion. My mom had walked out when I was 14, leaving behind a trail of arguments and unpaid bills. My dad tried to keep things afloat by working 12-hour night shifts at a manufacturing plant, but exhaustion made him a ghost in his own home. That left me, Amelia Carter, stuck in between roles. Too young to be anyone's mother, but too old to be anyone's carefree kid. My brother Ethan, 11, looked up at me with those wide gray eyes that always seemed to ask for answers I didn't have. I was taking classes at the community college and working part-time at an antique shop downtown. Between essays, closing shifts, and packing Ethan's lunch, life never felt still. October of 2011 was brutal. Rent was overdue, the furnace sputtered whenever the temperature dipped, and I could see the stress carving deeper lines into Dad's face. The only escape I had were my sketches. I'd sit at the kitchen table at night, Ethan asleep in the next room, and lose myself in pencil and paper. But even that was interrupted by dreams I couldn't shake. For 3 weeks straight, the same dream played out. A lonely road, Ridgeway Lane, ending in a house I'd never seen. White paint peeling, shutters broken, a single light burning in the upstairs window. And always a figure watching me from behind the glass. It didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. I'd wake up shivering, heart pounding, the image stuck behind my eyes like it had been burned there. I didn't know why it unnerved me so much. Dreams weren't real, right? But I carried it with me every day, like a warning that hadn't yet explained itself. At the shop where I worked, Mrs. Harlow noticed my distraction. She was in her 60s, sharp-tongued but kind, and she had a way of treating antiques as if they were living things. One Friday afternoon, just before Halloween, she handed me a wooden box wrapped in paper so brittle it crumbled at the edges. "Delivery for a collector," she said. "Outside town, Ridgeway Lane." The name hit me like a slap. My throat dried up, and for a second I thought maybe I'd misheard. "Where?" I asked. She repeated it. Ridgeway Lane. The coincidence made my skin crawl. I forced a laugh and asked, "What's in the box?" Her eyes flicked to mine. "Best you don't open it. Some items carry their own stories." I wanted to press, but her tone ended the conversation. She scribbled the address on a slip of paper, 132 Ridgeway Lane. My fingers shook when I tucked it into my pocket. That evening, Ethan begged to come with me. "I don't want to stay home alone, not on a Friday night," he said, eyes wide in that way that made me feel guilty. "Fine," I sighed, "but you stay in the car if it's weird." He grinned, and that was that. I told myself it was just another errand, just another house. But as the sun sank low and we turned down Ridgeway Lane, the sight of that house waiting at the end of the road made my stomach twist. It was the house from my dream, down to the last broken shutter, and the upstairs window glowed with a faint yellow light. By the time I parked, night had settled in full, pressing down with a kind of silence that felt heavier than it should. The houses along Ridgeway Lane sagged with age. Some had boards nailed across the windows. Others leaned as though a stiff wind might take them down. Only the last house, 132, stood with its faint, stubborn glow from upstairs. Ethan leaned forward in his seat, staring. "It looks haunted," he whispered. "Don't start," I muttered, trying to steady my voice. The porch creaked under our weight as we stepped up. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles touched the wood, the door eased open on its own. The air that spilled out was damp, sour, tinged with something metallic. Ethan pressed closer to me, his small hand gripping my arm. Inside, the hallway was dim. A table stood just beyond the doorway, its surface thick with dust except for one clean rectangle where something had been placed and removed many times. "Leave it on the table," a woman's voice called. It was faint, coming from somewhere deeper inside. The tone was flat, almost rehearsed, like she'd said those words 100 times before. My skin prickled. I set the wooden box on the table, trying not to breathe too deeply, said loudly, "It's here." "All right." Silence followed. For a moment, I thought that was the end of it. Then came the sound. Footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth directly above us. Ethan's grip tightened. "Mia," he whispered, his voice thin. "We should go." I stared at the staircase, waiting for someone to appear. No one did. My pulse drummed in my ears. The voice came again. "Don't go upstairs." This time it was closer. Too close, right behind me. I spun, but no one stood there. Just the open doorway, the dark beyond. Ethan whimpered, tugging me toward the exit, but something in me fought back. Curiosity, recklessness, call it what you want, told Ethan, forcing calm into my voice. "By the door. Don't move. Stay here." Two climbed halfway up the stairs, each creak echoing like a gunshot. The air grew colder with every step, and at the landing I saw it. A tall figure stood in the hallway, shadowy, motionless, its head tilted as though studying me. "Who are you?" I whispered. It didn't answer, didn't move. Then the woman's voice, right at my ear, though no one was near me, said again, "Not to go upstairs." "I told you." I spun around. Nothing. When I turned back, the figure was gone. The upstairs light flickered out, plunging everything into darkness. I didn't think. I bolted down the stairs, grabbed Ethan's hand, and we ran. As we stumbled off the porch, I dared one last look back. The upstairs window glowed again. The shadow figure stood pressed against the glass, watching us leave. We didn't speak the entire drive home. Ethan sat curled in the passenger seat, arms wrapped around himself, eyes glued to the road. My own hands shook on the steering wheel, but I kept them steady enough to get us home. When I pulled into the driveway, I popped the trunk, slid the wooden box inside, and slammed it shut like I was sealing away the night. I told myself I'd take it back to Mrs. Harlow first thing in the morning. That night, sleep didn't come easy. Every sound in the house set my nerves on edge. The radiator clanking, the wind against the windows. Sometime near dawn, exhaustion dragged me under. When I woke, the first thing I did was check the trunk. It was empty. The box was gone. I ransacked the car, tore through the back seat, even checked the grass around the driveway. Nothing. At the shop, I confronted Mrs. Harlow. "Where's the box?" I demanded. She blinked at me, genuinely confused. "What box?" "The one you gave me yesterday, for Ridgeway Lane." Her face tightened, puzzled but firm. "Amelia, I never sent you to Ridgeway Lane. We don't deliver to places like that, and I don't own a box like the one you're describing." I stared at her, words stuck in my throat. You wrote down the address? You told me." She shook her head. "I think you need some rest." I left in a fog, her words rattling in my skull. If she hadn't sent me, who had? And how had the box vanished? That night the dream returned. The same house, the same window, the figure. But this time, when I turned away in the dream, I heard footsteps following me. The weeks after felt heavier. Ethan jumped at small noises, and I pretended I didn't feel the same. Sometimes, late at night, I'd swear I heard footsteps in our own house. Slow, deliberate, pacing upstairs while we sat below. One evening, I caught Ethan staring at the ceiling. "Do you hear it too?" I asked softly. He nodded without looking at me. "It's the same steps from the other house." I wanted to tell him it wasn't real, that it was just fear crawling into our heads. But I couldn't bring myself to lie. By mid-November, I stopped sketching. Every time I put pencil to paper, my hand drew that house, the window, the figure, over and over again. It was like the image lived in me now, refusing to leave. Years passed. I moved out of my father's house, got my own apartment, tried to build a life. Ethan grew older, but even now, each October, he calls me. His voice lower now, but still carrying that same boyish unease. "I had the dream again," he'll say. And I'll admit I do too. The house on Ridgeway Lane hasn't faded from me. Every fall, when the leaves curl and the air smells of wood smoke, I'll find myself staring at my upstairs window, half expecting to see that figure standing there. Sometimes in the quietest hours of the night, I'll hear footsteps overhead. And in those moments, I wonder if the box really vanished, or if it never left me at all. Some doors once opened never close again. Curiosity can carry us into places we're not meant to go, and what waits there may follow long after we've left. The house on Ridgeway Lane taught me that the scariest hauntings aren't in abandoned houses. They're in the weight we carry with us, the echoes that live in our minds, and the choices that refuse to let us go. I used to think moving to Las Vegas was a kind of restart button. I was 27, freshly burned out from freelancing in Los Angeles, and I wanted somewhere cheaper, somewhere alive, but not as crushing as LA had been. Downtown Vegas seemed like the answer. Fremont Street was noisy, colorful, and chaotic, but it carried an energy I liked. The lights at night made the cracked sidewalks glow, and the mix of tourists, locals, and drifters gave the city this odd heartbeat that kept me going when work felt stale. When Lucas and I found the loft, it felt like a miracle. It wasn't fancy, just a 2-bedroom with exposed brick, high ceilings, and creaky wooden floors. Rent was steep, but with our friends Leah and Travis splitting the bill, it was doable. They'd been our people for years, the kind of friends you didn't have to clean up for, the kind you could argue with and still end up on the couch together with takeout 10 minutes later. But life doesn't wait for comfort. Leah landed a job in Phoenix, something she couldn't turn down, and Travis, predictably, followed her. That left Lucas and me staring at the reality we couldn't afford to avoid. We couldn't cover the place on our own, not without taking second jobs, and neither of us wanted to give it up. The loft had already started to feel like ours. So we turned to the modern-day lottery. Craigslist. I spent nights scrolling through endless messages, college kids looking for cheap rooms, older guys looking for something more than roommates, couples wanting temporary spots while they figured things out. Every interview felt like speed dating with higher stakes. Some people seemed too polished, others way too strange. Lucas and I would debrief at the diner afterward, whispering, "Could you live with them?" Most of the time the answer was no. Then came Kayla and Eric. We met them at a diner on Charleston Boulevard. Kayla was a fire hose of words. She told us within 10 minutes about her failed acting career, her amazing skincare side hustle, and her dream of starting a podcast. Her laugh was loud enough to turn heads. Eric, on the other hand, barely spoke. He sat across from me, pushing fries around his plate, and when he did look up, his eyes locked on mine with a kind of intensity that wasn't friendly. Afterward, Lucas nudged me. "They seem fine, babe. At least they have jobs." I wasn't convinced. Something about Eric made me want to get up and leave. But the rent deadline loomed, and practicality won over instinct. A week later, we handed Kayla and Eric the keys. For a while, it seemed fine. Kayla filled the apartment with scented candles, her voice echoing off the brick walls as she narrated her day. Eric disappeared often, sometimes for hours, sometimes overnight. It was unsettling but manageable. We told ourselves this was just the adjustment period, that roommates were never perfect. But soon, I started to notice the little things. The remote never where we left it. Dishes piling in the sink though Lucas and I hadn't cooked. And late at night when I'd get up for water, I'd hear Eric in the living room on the phone, his voice low, muttering things that made my stomach knot. One night I froze in the hallway when I heard him laugh quietly and say, "The balcony door. Easy. They don't even lock." He never knew I was listening. I told myself it was nothing, but deep down I felt the ground shift beneath me. At first, Lucas told me I was overreacting. People say weird stuff on the phone. He shrugged. Maybe he was joking. But the longer they stayed, the harder it was to ignore. Kayla treated the loft like a stage. She'd invite friends over without asking, blast music in the middle of the afternoon, and leave half-burnt candles scattered across the living room. More than once I came home to the smell of smoke because she'd fallen asleep with one lit. Eric was a different story. His silence wasn't shy, it was calculated. When he did speak, his words carried a mocking edge, like he enjoyed watching people squirm. Once, after I mentioned how late their friends stayed, he leaned close, his breath sour with beer, and whispered, "Relax, man. We're family now. You should loosen up." It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it, like a warning wrapped in a joke. Then the parties started. Not ours, theirs. We'd come home on a Friday night to find strangers spilling out onto the balcony, bottles clinking, the carpet sticky with beer. Eric thrived in it, roaming the room like he owned the place. Kayla laughed too loud, telling stories to people whose names I never caught. Lucas and I would retreat to our bedroom fuming, listening to the music thump through the wall. We argued constantly. Lucas wanted to confront them. I wanted to avoid the fight. But avoidance only worked until things started disappearing. First it was small, a set of vinyl records I'd been collecting since high school. I tore apart the living room looking for them, only to have Kayla shrug and say, "Maybe you misplaced them?" Lucas's headphones vanished next. He searched every drawer, every backpack, gone. Then came the final straw, my gaming console. I knew exactly where I'd left it, hooked up to the TV. One morning it was gone. Eric blamed random party guests, claiming someone must have walked off with it. His voice was calm, almost amused, like the theft was our fault for not watching our stuff. But I knew. One afternoon, heading down to the garage to swap laundry, I passed by Eric's beat-up silver Honda Civic. Something in me told me to look, and there they were, sitting in the back seat, my console, Lucas's headphones, stacked carelessly like junk. I snapped photos immediately, my hands trembling. That night, Lucas and I fought again. He wanted to confront Eric outright. I wanted to call the police. Both options felt dangerous. Eric wasn't the kind of guy you wanted cornered. We decided to wait until morning. I barely slept, listening for footsteps in the hallway, expecting Eric to barge in at any moment. At sunrise, I drove straight to the police station with the photos. The officer nodded politely, wrote down my statement, and promised to send someone by. I felt lighter as I left, like I'd finally taken control. But when the police came, Eric was gone. His clothes, his laptop, even the old Civic, vanished overnight. Kayla stood in the living room with wide eyes, playing dumb. "I don't know where he is," she insisted, her voice a mix of fear and performance. "We got into a fight. Maybe he left town." The police weren't convinced, but without him there, their hands were tied. They gave us a case number and left. Lucas and I didn't hesitate. We changed the locks that afternoon. We boxed up whatever Kayla and Eric had left behind and set it by the curb. Kayla cried, begged to stay, claimed she had nowhere to go. But my patience was gone. I told her she had 24 hours to leave. She left that night. For a while, it felt like we'd won. The loft was quiet again, ours again. But the peace was short-lived. It started 2 weeks later. I was taking out the trash when I saw it parked across the street. An old silver Honda Civic. The same dent on the rear bumper, the same faded paint. The windows were tinted, but I swear I saw him, Eric, leaning back in the driver's seat, watching. I froze, trash bag dangling from my hand, until a horn blared behind me, and the car drove off. When I told Lucas, he shook his head. "He's not coming back." "You're letting him live in your head. He's gone, Daniel," but I knew what I saw, and it wasn't just once. Some nights I'd look out the balcony and see headlights lingering at the curb. Not every night, not long enough to prove, but enough to feel hunted. I stopped sleeping well. Every creak of the loft made me flinch. I double-checked locks 3, 4 times. Lucas tried to be supportive, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. Living with Eric had damaged more than just our home. It had driven a wedge between us. One night, I stood by the window at 2 a.m, staring at the street. The car wasn't there, but I still felt the weight of eyes on me. Months passed. The Civic stopped showing up. Or maybe I stopped looking. Lucas and I tried to rebuild our routine, but the loft never felt the same. Every shadow felt suspect. Every knock at the door made my heart race. Eventually, we moved. Not far, just to another apartment across town. Smaller, safer, less history. I told myself we were starting fresh again, but the truth lingered. The fear never completely left me. Even now, years later, I sometimes catch myself scanning parking lots for that silver Civic. I wonder where Eric went, if he found someone else to leech onto, to intimidate, to steal from. I wonder if he ever thinks about us. But mostly, I think about how easy it was to let him in. How desperation made us lower the walls we should have kept standing. The scariest part wasn't what he took from us. It was how quickly a stranger slipped into our lives, how easily we ignored the warning signs. The loft on Fremont Street taught me something I'll never forget. Desperation can blur our judgment, and when we ignore our instincts, we often invite danger closer than we realize. Protecting your space, your home, your peace, your boundaries, means listening to the small voice that warns you when something feels wrong. Because once you let the wrong person in, it's far harder to get them out. I used to think boredom was the worst enemy a person could have. Growing up in Linton Hollow, Arkansas, I knew boredom like the back of my hand. The town was small enough that everyone knew the sound of everyone else's truck, small enough that any excitement got passed around and burned out in less than a week. My dad always said Linton Hollow was the kind of place people got stuck in, not the kind they dreamed about. I figured he was right. But when you're 19 and don't know anything else, stuck is just life. Our house sat right off the highway. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, chipped paint, a roof that groaned every time the wind shifted. Dad worked construction when he could find jobs, and when he couldn't, he'd park himself in his recliner with a cigarette in one hand and a beer in the other, eyes glued to whatever game was playing. Since Mom left years before, we didn't talk much. Silence was easier than opening wounds we couldn't close. The only thing that broke that silence for me was Zeke Harper. Zeke and I had been inseparable since middle school. We were the kind of kids who built forts out in the pine woods and rode our bikes until the tires were bare. Zeke had a spark I didn't. Reckless. Restless. He hated this town more than anyone I'd ever met, but instead of leaving, he kept trying to set fire to its monotony with pranks, dares, and trouble. His mom barely noticed. His dad was long gone, and Zeke lived in a sagging trailer 3 blocks from me. By 2011, we were on different tracks. I was clawing my way through community college classes, hoping they might lead somewhere. Zeke had already dropped out. He worked odd jobs at the gas station and spent nights smoking behind the dumpster or driving his beat-up Chevy down back roads with no destination. He liked to talk about bigger things, bigger places, bigger lives. But I think we both knew he didn't have a plan. One chilly October night, we were sitting on the hood of his Chevy outside the Dollar General, the hum of the neon sign buzzing above us. He lit a cigarette, took a drag, and grinned. "You ever think about how dead this place is?" he asked. "All the time," I said. He leaned back, smoke curling around his head, something big, like Bigfoot. "What if we gave him something to talk about?" I laughed. "Bigfoot? Seriously?" "Yeah, man, think about it. People here want to believe in something. Ghosts, monsters, whatever. You give them a glimpse, they'll eat it up." I thought he was joking, but a week later he showed up at my house holding a plastic bag with a mangy-looking Bigfoot costume inside. The mask was rubber, the fur was patchy, but at night it didn't look half bad. The first time we tried it, I drove down Miller Creek Road while Zeke sprinted across the headlights. For a second I almost believed it myself. Within days, blurry photos popped up on Facebook. Folks were buzzing. Saw something strange near Miller Creek. Some thought it was funny, others swore it was real. Zeke soaked up every comment like it was gasoline on a fire. At first I laughed with him. It felt harmless. Then the dog started turning up dead. Not just dead, mutilated. Torn open in ways no coyote could have managed. It was all over the local news. Parents kept their kids inside after dark. Suddenly, Bigfoot wasn't just a joke anymore. Zeke came to me pale and shaking. "I saw it," he said. "Saw what?" "Someone else. Same suit. Out there. It wasn't me, and it wasn't you." I wanted to tell him he was imagining things, but the fear in his eyes made me swallow the words. That was when the fun stopped, and something darker took its place. Zeke had always been a little wild, but after that night, something in him shifted. He stopped joking about Bigfoot, stopped bragging about fooling the town. Instead, he jumped at every sound, his eyes darting to the tree line like something was waiting for him there. One evening, I walked to his trailer and found him crouched on the porch, setting down a bag of raw meat. The smell hit me before I even spoke. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked. He startled, then looked up, his face pale. "Keeping it away." "Keeping what away? Strays?" He shook his head. "No, you know what I mean." I stared at the buzzing flies around the bag. Coyotes. "You're losing it, man. There's nothing out there," but Zeke's voice cracked. I saw it again. Taller than me, wearing the same damn fur. But the face, it wasn't right. It wasn't human. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I left him there on that porch muttering to himself, shadows shifting behind his hollow eyes. That night my phone rang at 2 a.m. I answered groggily, and Zeke's voice came through ragged. "They're watching me," he whispered. "Who?" Silence. Then, "You'll see." 3 days later, his trailer caught fire. The firefighters called it a space heater accident. Folks nodded and moved on. But when I visited him at the hospital, His arms wrapped in gauze, he grabbed my wrist with a burned hand and hissed, "It wasn't an accident. It's out there, and it looks just like me." I left shaken, the words gnawing at me. That same week, my house was broken into. Nothing stolen. Drawers dumped, clothes scattered, cupboards opened. The sheriff said it was kids messing around. Dad shrugged it off. But I knew. I could feel the wrongness like a draft slipping through the cracks. A month later, I woke to creaking floorboards at 2 a.m. At first, I thought it was Dad getting water, but when I opened my door, I froze. A tall, hunched figure stood in the hallway, hairy, breathing heavy. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dark. For a second, I thought it was the costume. Then it tilted its head in a disturbingly human way. "Zeke," I whispered, trembling. It didn't answer. It just backed into the shadows, step by jerky step until it was gone. By the time I turned on every light in the house, there was nothing. No footprints, no sign of a break-in, just the faint smell of smoke like burned wood. After that night, I stopped sleeping. Every creak in the house, every gust of wind outside, I heard it. I tried telling Dad, but he just grunted and told me to lay off the scary movies. I couldn't tell him that I hadn't watched a scary movie in months, that I was living one. I drove to the hospital to see Zeke again. He was half asleep, his bandaged arms twitching against the sheets. When I said his name, his eyes shot open, wide and desperate. "You saw it too, didn't you?" he rasped. I didn't answer. He nodded anyway. "It wants us. It's not just playing anymore." "What do you mean?" I whispered. "It knows your face now. Don't feed it. Don't talk to it. Don't even look at it if you can help it." His uncle came 2 days later and moved him to Missouri. He didn't say goodbye in person. Just left me a note. "Don't look for it. It knows your face now." For weeks after, the town went quiet. No new dog killings, no strange sightings on Facebook. People chalked it up to hysteria. But at night, driving home, I'd catch a shadow lurching in the trees. Too tall to be a deer, too slow to be a hunter. Once I thought I saw its eyes in the ditch glowing like embers. Life tried to move on. Classes piled up. Dad grumbled about bills. Folks went back to fishing and gossiping and mowing their patchy yards. But the silence in the woods pressed harder than ever. One evening, heading home from campus, I found my front door wide open. Dad wasn't home yet. Inside, everything looked the same, except my room. Drawers dumped, sheets pulled off, closet door hanging open. Nothing missing, just like last time. I sat on the porch steps until Dad pulled up. When he asked what was wrong, I just shook my head. I couldn't explain something he'd never believe. Nights blurred together. Sometimes I'd wake to tapping on the window, soft but insistent. Other times I'd hear heavy breathing in the hallway. Always, there was the faint smell of smoke. I thought about running. But where would I go? Zeke had run, and it still haunted him. His words rang in my head. Don't feed it. Don't look for it. One night I drove aimlessly, ending up at Miller Creek. I parked and stared at the water, moonlight breaking across it. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate. When I turned, the woods were empty. Years have passed since then, but I never really left Linton Hollow. Dad got older, the house sagged further, and I stayed. People sometimes ask why. Truth is, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm waiting. Maybe I'm too scared to leave. Sometimes, late at night, I see shapes in the tree line when I drive home. Lurching, hunched, familiar. Sometimes I hear breathing just outside my window. Zeke never came back. I heard he moved again, farther north. I never called, never wrote. What would I say? That I still see it? That it still knows me? There are nights I sit on the porch and wonder if Zeke was the bad influence for starting it all, or if he was the only one who truly understood what we let in. Because whatever it is, it's still here, and it's still watching. Sometimes we think boredom is harmless, that chasing thrills or playing pranks will fill the emptiness of small-town life. But some doors, once opened, can't be closed again. Fear, once invited, doesn't leave. The lesson I carry from Linton Hollow is simple. Some stories aren't meant to be written by us, and some shadows are better left alone. When I think back to the fall of 2014, I don't remember the crisp air or the changing leaves or even the excitement of being 20 and in college. What I remember most is the apartment on Logan Street and the way it felt like both freedom and prison at the same time. Money was always tight for me. My parents lived in Nebraska, and though they helped when they couldn't cover the kind of rent Denver demanded. So I took what I could get, a 3-bedroom on the corner of Logan, a block away from a laundromat that smelled like bleach and a dive bar that blasted music until 2 in the morning. It wasn't glamorous, but it was cheap. And at 20, cheap felt like the only thing that mattered. I didn't move in alone. Emma and Lauren came with the place, already living there when I signed on. Emma was unforgettable from the start. Loud, quick to laugh, the kind of person who could walk into a room and instantly know everyone's name by the time she left. She majored in communications but spent more time organizing beer pong brackets than attending lectures. She had that quality of being effortlessly liked, even when she didn't deserve it. Lauren, on the other hand, was quiet to the point of disappearing. She was neat, careful, always hunched over her biology textbooks at the kitchen table. She wore sweaters in every season and apologized too much, like existing was an inconvenience. I found myself somewhere between them, just trying to keep up with classes, work my shifts at the bookstore, and hold on to some sense of balance. At first, the apartment was fine. The radiator hissed like it had lungs. The kitchen smelled faintly of burnt toast no matter what we cooked, and the floors creaked enough to sound like footsteps at night. But it was ours, and that felt like something. Emma kept the place lively with friends and laughter. Lauren kept it orderly, and I kept reminding myself that this was temporary, that the stress and smallness were worth it for the independence. But cracks started showing quickly. Emma loved having people over. At first it was fun, friends laughing on the balcony, music spilling into the hall, late-night talks around the kitchen table. Then the parties grew, and strangers began crashing on our couch, leaving cigarette butts everywhere, drinking our milk straight from the carton. One night, after finding a guy I'd never met asleep in the hallway outside my room, I confronted Emma. "Hey, can you at least give us a heads up? I've got an exam tomorrow." She rolled her eyes and smiled that careless smile. "You're older." "Relax, it's college. You'll miss this when..." But I wasn't so sure. Lauren, meanwhile, avoided saying anything directly to Emma, but I noticed her locking her door at night. Once, while we were both brushing our teeth, she leaned close and whispered, "Swear I woke up and someone was standing in my doorway. I thought it was you." It wasn't me, I told her, my stomach twisting. When we brought it up to Emma, she laughed it off. "You've been studying too much, get some sleep." That was Emma's way, never serious, always a joke. But the more she laughed, the more uneasy I felt. The first real cracks weren't about noise or parties, they were about money. We'd agreed to split rent and utilities evenly, but Emma had a habit of forgetting. When I brought it up, she leaned against the counter with a smirk. "You make more at your job than I do, right? What's $20? "It's not about the money," I said, heat rising in my face. "Then what is it about? You being uptight again?" She winked like it was a joke, but I could see in her eyes that she meant every word. Lauren and I ended up covering her share more often than not. She always promised to get us back, but she never did. And slowly it stopped feeling like she was just careless. It felt intentional. Then came Chase. I first met him when I came home from work one night and found him sitting in our kitchen, feet up on the table, beer in hand. He was older, mid-30s maybe, greasy hair slicked back, a smug smile that didn't fade even when he looked me over like I was a bug under glass. "Who's this?" he asked Emma, jerking his thumb toward me. My roommate, Emma said with a shrug as if I wasn't standing right there. From that night on, he was around constantly. At first, just now and then every other night, then almost every night. He didn't live there, but it started to feel like he did. I didn't like the way he looked at us, me and especially Lauren. His eyes lingered too long, his grin too wide. Once I caught him in the hallway staring at Lauren's closed door like he was debating whether to knock. One night I woke up to glass shattering. I rushed out to find Chase standing over a broken lamp, Emma laughing at his side. "You can't just trash the place," I snapped. "We live here too." Emma's smile vanished. "Don't talk to him like that. He's family to me." Family. The word hung in the air like smoke. From that moment on, she sided with him against us. Lauren stopped spending time in the common areas. I followed her lead. The apartment no longer felt like ours. It felt like his. By late October, the tension in the apartment was unbearable. Emma mocked Lauren for being paranoid, teased me for being uptight, and whispered to Chase when they thought we couldn't hear. One night, Lauren and I sat on the fire escape outside my bedroom window, wrapped in blankets against the chill. She whispered, "She's not the same Emma we met." "I know," I said. "She scares me now." I didn't say it out loud, but I agreed. It wasn't just her. The whole apartment felt off, like it had soaked up their hostility and turned against us. The smell of burnt toast was stronger. The radiator hissed louder. The creaks in the floors felt heavier, like footsteps we couldn't see. Then came the night we realized we weren't just dealing with carelessness anymore. We were dealing with something darker. I came home from work to find my bedroom door wide open. Drawers rifled through, notebooks scattered, my journal tossed onto the bed like someone had been reading it. Lauren's room looked the same. Emma and Chase were in the kitchen, drinking and laughing. "Did you go through our stuff?" I demanded. Chase leaned back, smirking. "If you've got nothing to hide, why does it matter?" Emma laughed. "God, you're so dramatic. We were just looking for a lighter." I stood there shaking, rage boiling in me. Lauren appeared in the hallway, her face pale. She didn't say a word, just grabbed my arm and pulled me into my room. We locked the door behind us. That night, she whispered, "I can't stay here anymore." "Neither can I," said, already packing a bag. We moved out the next morning. No dramatic fight, no screaming match. Just two girls with backpacks and duffel bags, slipping out while Emma and Chase were passed out on the couch. We found a small sublet across town just for the rest of the semester. It was cramped, the radiator didn't work, and the neighbors upstairs stomped around like elephants. But it felt safe, and safe was worth everything. Emma didn't call. She didn't text. For a while I expected some message, some confrontation, but there was nothing. A month later, I heard from a mutual friend that Emma had dropped out of school. She'd moved in with Chase full-time. No one saw her much after that. She stopped showing up at parties, stopped answering texts. It was like she'd disappeared. Lauren tried to talk about it sometimes. "Do you think she regrets it?" she'd ask. I never knew what to say, because I wasn't sure the Emma we knew was even still there to regret anything. It's been years now. But I still think about that apartment. I still remember the creaking floors, the hiss of the radiator, the constant smell of burnt toast. But mostly, I remember the way Emma's laughter shifted, how it went from infectious to cruel, from a sound that made you feel included to one that made you feel small. Sometimes I wonder if Emma was always that way, if Chase just brought it out of her, or if she became someone else entirely. I don't know which possibility scares me more. Lauren and I stayed friends, but even now, we don't like talking about Logan Street. When we do, it's in hushed tones, like speaking about it too loudly might make it real again. College is supposed to be about finding yourself. For me, it was also about learning who I needed to stay away from. And Emma, well, she taught me that sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who can turn into strangers overnight. The apartment on Logan Street taught me that bad influences don't always come from obvious enemies. Sometimes they come from the people we laugh with, live with, and trust. The danger isn't always in recognizing who they are, it's in realizing too late how far you've let them in. I grew up in Rochester, New York, in a neighborhood that wasn't flashy, but it had its small charms. Maple trees lining the sidewalks, neighbors who waved as you walked by, and the occasional snowstorm that made the world feel magical for a few days. I was always the quiet kid, more interested in sketching and photography than sports, though I tried both in middle school just to fit in. My dad had lost his job at a factory 2 years earlier, and since then, I'd been doing what I could to help with bills, shoveling snow, babysitting, and eventually working part-time at Maple Brew, a small coffee shop near the edge of the strip mall. Photography became my escape. My camera wasn't just a tool, it was a shield, a lens through which I could observe the world without being fully in it. I carried it everywhere, to class, on walks, even to the coffee shop. I liked capturing things people ignored, the way light hit a puddle, the quiet moments between strangers on a bus, the frost on the edge of a car windshield. It gave me a sense of control in a world that sometimes felt too big. It was a Friday night in early December 2018 when I first noticed him. The first snow of the season had started falling, a thin, wet layer of slush forming over the roads and sidewalks. I had just finished my shift at Maple Brew, closing up the shop around 10:30 p.m. Most of the regulars had left hours earlier, leaving just one man sitting in the corner with a leather notebook. He hadn't ordered anything in hours, yet he occasionally looked up at me in a way that made my stomach tighten. Something about him was off, but I brushed it off as imagination. Jenna, my co-worker, offered to wait with me for my Uber. She was kind like that, always looking out for others despite having her own worries. Her younger brother was sick, and she juggled extra hours at a nearby pharmacy. I insisted I'd be fine and didn't want to bother her, a decision I regretted the moment I stepped outside. The snow made everything quieter, muffled, almost dreamlike. But in that dream, there was him. I first saw him standing by the lamppost at the far end of the parking lot. He wasn't moving, just there, watching. My mind raced. Maybe he's waiting for a ride, maybe smoking. But he wasn't smoking, and his face was obscured by a hood. Every step I took, he seemed to adjust, subtly, angled to face me. My Uber app said 3 minutes away. 3 minutes stretched like 3 hours. When he spoke, I nearly jumped. "Cold night, isn't it?" His voice was calm, too calm, and it came from behind me. I hadn't heard him move, but suddenly, he was closer than I expected, 10 feet away, just enough to feel the weight of him. I forced a polite smile, my voice trembling. "Yeah, it is." "Working late?" he asked, casual, almost teasing. I lied. "Just grabbing something quick, not working." My heart thumped against my ribs. He chuckled softly like he knew something I didn't. Around this time most nights. "I've seen you before, though." You close up, I realized then that he had been watching me for weeks, maybe longer. And in that moment, I understood I wasn't just uncomfortable, I was in danger. For the next week, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Every time I left Maple Brew or walked home from class, I scanned the streets, looking for shadows, strangers, anything that didn't belong. At first, I thought it was paranoia, an overreaction fueled by too many late nights and cold walks alone. But when I told Jenna, she nodded slightly. "I've noticed him too," she said quietly one afternoon while we cleaned the counter. "The gray hoodie. He doesn't order anything and just sits there sometimes." The guy in my stomach dropped. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. I tried to adjust my routine. I started leaving the shop with coworkers, walking in groups, taking different streets. But he adapted too. Weeks later, I saw the same figure across the street, half hidden under the flickering streetlights, always watching, never approaching. One night, I stayed behind at the shop to take inventory. It was almost midnight. I had headphones on, music drowning out the soft hum of the neon sign. When I finally locked the door, I froze. There he was again, standing by the lamppost, hands in his pockets, hood low. My legs felt like lead as I walked across the lot. "You shouldn't trust every driver either," he said when I approached my Uber, which had just pulled up. I didn't look back, sliding into the car, hands trembling. The older driver asked if I was okay. I nodded, saying nothing. How could I explain someone was stalking me without sounding insane? That night I barely slept. My dreams were fragmented. Streetlights, hooded figures, snow falling too fast, and my own footsteps echoing in an empty parking lot. I woke up drenched in sweat, the camera on my nightstand a cold weight against my skin. I started documenting everything, not just for my own safety, but for proof. Notes, sketches, even pictures of the lot and the lamppost. I became hyper-aware of patterns. He always appeared on Fridays, always around 10:30, always at the same spot. He seemed to know when I would be alone, when I was vulnerable. One Friday, I arrived early to close the shop. I hid near the door, camera ready. Sure enough, 10 minutes before closing, he appeared. Not moving, just observing like a predator waiting for the right moment. My fingers shook as I took a few discreet pictures. He noticed and turned his head slightly. For the first time, I saw his eyes. Cold, calculating, not humanely curious, but watching. I considered calling the police, I really did. But what would I tell them? A stranger standing? Watching? It sounded ridiculous. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I'd have to protect myself alone. I bought a small pepper spray keychain, carried it at all times, practiced slingshot motion in my room. I walked differently, stayed in well-lit areas and avoided distractions. Even the snow, once magical, now felt like a hazard, masking movement, making shadows deeper. Weeks passed. He didn't escalate. No approach, no threats. But the psychological toll was heavy. I couldn't concentrate in class, couldn't sleep without checking the windows. My friends noticed my nervousness. "It's just one guy," Jenna said. "Maybe he's harmless." But something in his presence told me otherwise. One night, I stayed at Maple Brew after closing again. I left the back door unlocked just to make a quick exit if needed. He appeared again, but this time, closer than ever, just 20 feet away. I held my camera in front of me like a weapon. "You see the world differently," he said softly, studying me. "You notice things others miss." "Yes," I said, voice shaking. "And I notice you following me. Leave me alone." He tilted his head, smiling faintly. "We'll see." And then he disappeared, melting into the night. That was the last time I saw him in person, but the fear lingered. Every dark corner, every streetlight, every lamppost reminded me of him. I changed my routine, avoided the lot for months, and started leaving class later, taking cabs home instead of walking. Months later, the snow melted, and the city returned to its usual rhythm. I never saw the man again at Maple Brew or across the street. But the paranoia never fully left. I carried my camera everywhere, not just for art anymore, but as a shield, as a comfort. The stranger taught me lessons I didn't want but needed. Awareness, self-preservation, and trust in intuition. I realized that danger doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits, silent, patient, watching. And the best defense isn't confrontation, it's vigilance, preparation, and the courage to leave when necessary. Even now, walking through empty lots or dim streets, I remember him. The gray hoodie, the stillness, the way he made me feel like my every step was known. And I know that while he's gone, the lesson remains. You never really know who's watching, so you must always watch yourself. The stranger in the parking lot taught me that safety is not a given, and awareness is a skill you must cultivate. Trust your instincts, take precautions, and never dismiss the feeling that someone may be watching. The world can seem safe, but vigilance and preparation are the only shields against unseen threats. I never thought I'd be living back at 47 Willow Lane at 29. Moving back home was supposed to be temporary, just a stopover while I put myself back together after the breakup with Noah. 3 years of love ended in a single sentence. I don't think this is working anymore. And suddenly my apartment, my routines, even my photographs felt like they belonged to someone else. So, I packed what I could carry into my old hatchback and drove across town, back to the Victorian two-story I'd grown up in. The house smelled the same, a blend of floor polish and my mom's lavender detergent. The stoop lamp buzzed like it always had, flickering against the cracked mailbox stamped 47 BOAU. The oak tree out front had only grown more stubborn, its roots lifting the pavement into small hills. Everything looked the same, but I wasn't the same girl who had left. Mom, Elaine, greeted me with that booming laugh she carried even when her arthritis made her wince. "Home again," she said, wrapping her arms around me. "See? The house missed you." Marcus, my younger brother, wasn't as welcoming. He stood in the doorway with crossed arms, shaking his head. "You're almost 30, Jenna. You can't keep running back here when life punches you." I forced a smile, carrying my box of cameras into the house. "It's not running. It's regrouping." He rolled his eyes. "You need to stand on your own. Mom can't keep bailing you out." I didn't respond. I unpacked my old Nikon, set it on the kitchen table, and tried to believe this was a healing project, not a regression. That first week was quiet. I walked the streets with my camera, photographing empty diners and bus depots. I cooked eggs without burning them for the first time in my life. Slowly, I began to breathe again. And then the blinds in my bedroom wouldn't stay down. At first I told myself it was just the house settling, the cords old and slipping. But then my phone charger vanished, and a hairpin appeared on my bathroom counter that wasn't mine. Small things, easily explained, except they weren't. That's when Riley started showing up again. He'd grown up next door, the boy who once traded me sandwiches through the fence. Now in his 30s, he worked night shifts at a courier hub and spent weekends exploring abandoned buildings. He always had keys somehow, keys to places no one else could get into. One evening, I came home from shooting photos and found him sitting on the porch steps, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "Late night?" he asked, smiling too steadily. "Just taking pictures," I said, brushing past him. "You talked to someone at 2 a.m. last night?" His voice was casual, but the question made my skin prickle. I froze. "What?" "I heard your voice," he said simply. "Thin walls, you know. Just want to make sure you're safe." I laughed it off, but that night when I hung up my green coat, I found it draped inside out on the chair the next morning. Mom insisted Riley was practical and kind. Marcus, though, muttered under his breath, "He's too interested in you. Way too interested." I brushed both of them off. But in the pit of my stomach, I felt the truth pressing in. Not everyone who remembers you is safe. It was October 18th, a damp autumn night when the air smelled of wet leaves. I came home from photographing an empty bus depot, and there it was. The spare key. Not just any key, but the key. The one I had given Riley when we were 16, after I broke my foot and he swore he'd help me if I ever got locked out. I had forgotten it even existed, tucked away in some dusty drawer. But there it was, sitting on the kitchen island, waiting like a threat. I stared at it for a long time. No note, no explanation. The next night I woke up gasping, certain I'd felt breath near my ear. My room was dim with moonlight, and in the doorway stood Riley. Pale, silent, holding my phone. "I unplugged your charger," he said, calm as if he was announcing the weather. "I needed to know if you'd call him." I sat up, trembling. "What are you doing in here?" His smile was wrong, stretched too thin. "Someone should be keeping you safe, Jen. There are men who don't deserve you." I wanted to scream, but instead I whispered, "Get out." He left without argument, but the air in my room stayed heavy, like he'd left a part of himself behind. The next morning, Mom slammed her mug on the counter when I told her. Tea splashed across the table. You gave him a key? Jenna, you're not a child anymore. Marcus paced the kitchen. You said you were done letting people control you, and now Riley's playing house like this is normal. This place isn't a charity. He grew up next door, I muttered, voice small. Riley stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets. We grew up together. I just want to protect her. Don't you remember when she broke her wrist? I watched her take photos through the window. She shouldn't have to be alone. Mom's voice cracked. Protecting is not possession. I wanted to believe her. But deep down, I feared she was wrong. Because Riley wasn't asking permission anymore. He was taking space that wasn't his. I changed the locks. It should have been the end of it. A locksmith came, turned the tumblers, and handed me new keys. Fresh start, he said. But Riley always had keys. That was the thing about him. I started noticing little shifts. A chair slightly moved. The smell of cigarette smoke clinging to my scarf after a day indoors. My coat pockets turned inside out. I bought a cheap motion-activated recorder and hid it in the hallway. I tucked a tiny camera inside the lampshade. It felt ridiculous, like I was preparing for a ghost instead of a neighbor. But ghosts don't whisper your name at night. One Thursday at 1:17 a.m. I left the back door unlocked on purpose. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone recording, heart pounding. The porch steps creaked. The door opened. Riley's voice floated in, soft as a lullaby. You left it open, you should be careful. I forced my breath steady. Riley, you have to leave. We're not kids anymore. He didn't move. He looked past me into the dark hallway, whispering to no one I could see. I told them I'd keep her. My blood ran cold. Marcus came over after I showed him the recording, his face drained of color. We're going to the police. Mom wrung her hands. This is going to break the neighborhood in half. He's been part of this family as long as we've lived here. I snapped. He's not family, Mom. He's a man who walks into my room at night. For once, Marcus didn't argue with me. He drove me to the precinct, where I handed over the footage. An officer nodded grimly. Riley was arrested 2 nights later, caught with a duplicate key on him. Trespassing. Stalking. The words felt foreign, like they belonged in someone else's story. Mom hugged me when it was over, but it felt like she was patching a wound too deep to heal. Marcus wouldn't look me in the eye. I tried to move forward. I took photos of the sunrise, drank coffee on the porch, told myself the worst was behind me. But safety doesn't return overnight. And 2 weeks later I found the Polaroid. It was tucked inside an envelope in the magazine rack. A Polaroid of me, asleep on the couch, blanket pulled to my chin, dated April 3rd, 2019. On the back, in Marcus's handwriting, for when she forgets who's real. My stomach dropped. I confronted him that night. Why is your handwriting on this? He paled. I just told Riley to keep an eye on you after the breakup. You were a mess, Jenna. It was a joke that spiraled. A joke? My voice shook. You handed me over like a project. Like I couldn't live without being watched. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We all thought we knew what was best for you. I locked the spare key in a drawer, hands trembling. That night I realized the true horror. It wasn't only Riley crossing boundaries. It was family, too. The people who loved me had blurred the line between care and control until I couldn't tell the difference. And love, when it's scared, can invent monsters. And sometimes it feeds them. The scariest betrayals don't always come from strangers. They come from the people who believe they're protecting us. Boundaries are not walls against love. They are the shape of it. Without them, protection becomes possession, and care turns into control. To truly love someone is to trust them to stand on their own, even when it terrifies us. I used to think friendship was a kind of shield. When you're little, you hold hands in the schoolyard, make promises under fireworks, and believe the bond will outlast everything. Parents fighting, high school drama, even heartbreak. I believed that about Lauren and Cassie. We'd built lemonade stands out of cardboard boxes, sat in detention together for passing notes, and once ran through sprinklers at midnight like the whole world belonged to us. But time stretches things, makes them thinner, and you don't notice when the threads begin to fray. The night it all broke for me was November 9th, 2016. I was 17. The rain hammered the lake cabin on Westfield Road so hard the windows shook. I lay in a borrowed sleeping bag pretending to sleep and listened to the voices of the two people I trusted most. I caught only 2 words, but they were enough to make my chest tighten. Tonight and gone. When I agreed to the sleepover, my mom had said, "Don't let nostalgia blind you. Old friends can cut deep." I rolled my eyes, like any teenager does when their mother sounds bitter, but I should have listened harder. My parents were splitting at the seams back then. My dad had already moved out, and my mom was stretched thin with worry, always telling me, "Focus on college, not drama." That's why the idea of a weekend with Lauren and Cassie had felt like a lifeline. We hadn't had a real sleepover in years. Life had pulled us in different directions. Lauren with her theater rehearsals, Cassie with her science fairs, me with my sketchbooks, and Noah, the quiet boy who played guitar and scribbled little riffs on napkins just for me. The cabin belonged to Lauren's parents. It smelled like damp wool and cocoa. Outside, the storm bent the birch trees, and the lake shimmered black like a restless animal. Inside, we tried to pretend we were still the same girls who once tied friendship bracelets until our wrists ached. We played Uno. Lauren slapped down her cards with too much force, smiling too wide. Cassie laughed, but it had an edge, like she was testing the sound of it. The jokes started harmless until they weren't. "You really think Noah's into you for your brains?" Lauren asked, grinning, but her eyes were sharp. Cassie chimed in, "Yeah, Emmy, you always get the attention. Some of us are tired of being extras in your movie." I forced a laugh. "Relax. It's just cards." But when I went to grab popcorn, I saw the way they glanced at each other, quick and secret, like a line in a play I wasn't given the script to. That night I lay in my sleeping bag listening to the storm. I kept hearing my parents' voices in my head. My mom's warning. "Don't go there to prove loyalty. Go because you trust them." My dad on the phone. "Sometimes friends outgrow each other, Em. Don't cling." At 12:17 a.m., the kitchen faucet turned on. Mugs clinked. I squeezed my eyes shut, breathing evenly, pretending sleep. Cassie's voice was low, trembling. "If we wait, she'll never get it. Tonight, Lauren. Tonight." Lauren's reply was cold, rehearsed like one of her monologues. "We'll make it look like she ran away. She's always so dramatic anyway." My blood ran ice cold. I thought about running then, bolting for the door, but my phone was charging in the kitchen, by them. Outside, the rain slammed against the dock, wild and relentless. I felt trapped, the zipper of my bag locked up around me like a shroud. Their footsteps padded closer. I heard a drawer slide open. A metallic clink. Cassie whispered, "Don't mess this up." Lauren hissed back, "She deserves it. She took everything. Noah, the spotlight. Even Mom says she acts perfect." Every memory of us laughing together suddenly felt like camouflage. I wasn't their best friend. I was their target. I tried to keep breathing evenly, but my pulse hammered in my ears. Their shadows loomed, stretching long across the floor. I thought about Noah, about how he once told me, "You draw people like you're trying to save them, but no sketch could save me now." When I felt the air shift, when I knew they were close enough to touch me, I moved. In one violent rip, I unzipped the sleeping bag and bolted upright. The lamp toppled, crashing to the floor. Lauren cursed. Cassie shrieked. I sprinted barefoot, knocking over a chair, and grabbed my phone cord from the counter. I didn't even look back. I just ran. The rain hit me like ice as I burst out the door. My feet slapped the muddy ground, slipping, but I didn't stop. 200 yards down, a neighbor's porch light glowed faintly through the storm. A dog barked. My lungs burned, but I screamed anyway, my voice tearing out of me raw. "Help, please!" porch lights flicked on. The dog barked louder. I stumbled into the yard, gasping, pointing back toward the cabin. By the time I collapsed on the neighbor's steps, Lauren and Cassie hadn't followed. The police arrived within the hour. Lauren cried and swore it had been a prank. Cassie nodded furiously, her face pale, insisting, "We weren't serious, it was just a joke." But I remembered Cassie's trembling voice. Tonight or never. Mom met me at the station, her arms tight around me, muttering, "I told you, Emily, I told you." But it didn't feel like comfort. It felt like shame, like I had walked straight into the trap she'd warned me about. I moved in with my dad soon after. His place was quieter, safer. He didn't hover, just let me sit with my sketchbook. But I couldn't bring myself to draw faces anymore. It felt dangerous, like studying expressions too closely would reveal more betrayal. Noah stayed close. He held my hand in the cafeteria, walked me to class. But even with him, trust felt cracked, like a mirror shattered into too many pieces. Every reflection cut a little. Lauren and Cassie were suspended but never charged. Everyone at school whispered about it. Some thought I exaggerated. Others gave me looks like I was cursed. Either way, I learned fast that the world doesn't hand you sympathy just because you almost lost everything. 2 months later, I got a package from the school's Lost and Found. Inside was my sketchbook, the one I'd left at the cabin. My stomach twisted as I flipped through the pages. On the last page, there was a drawing I hadn't made, my own face. Eyes closed, mouth sewn shut with thick black ink stitches. Underneath, in Cassie's blocky handwriting, were the words, "Best friends forever." I sat on my bed for hours, the sketchbook heavy in my lap. I thought about Lauren's perfect rehearsed lines, about Cassie's obsession with control. I thought about my mom's warning, my dad's advice, and I thought about that night, when the storm outside wasn't half as violent as the betrayal inside the cabin. The scariest part wasn't the knife or the rain or even the running. The scariest part was realizing they had rehearsed my erasure for weeks, and that somewhere inside them, the performance wasn't over. The deepest cuts don't always come from strangers. They come from the people we let closest, the ones who know our secrets and our soft spots. Trust is a gift, not a guarantee. And friendship without respect is only a stage where envy rehearses cruelty. We must learn to draw boundaries, to listen to our instincts, and to remember that walking away from the wrong people is sometimes the bravest act of love we can give ourselves. The night was heavy with summer heat, the kind that presses against your skin even through layers of cotton sheets. I woke to the faint creak of a floorboard somewhere near the hallway. My heart hammered before I even opened my eyes. Daniel was away on a late business trip and the house felt unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that stretched every second into a minute. I reached for the bedside lamp, but the bulb fizzled with a sharp pop, leaving me in darkness. My fingers fumbled along the nightstand, grazing my phone, but before I could light the screen, I heard it. A whisper, low and sing-song, almost comforting. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." I froze, breath caught in my chest. The voice was familiar yet impossible. It belonged to Melissa, our neighbor. The thought made me dizzy. Why would she be in our house at 1:42 in the morning? Weeks before, Melissa had seemed harmless. Her visits were frequent but friendly, a pie here, a bottle of wine there, a quiet curiosity about our lives. She worked part-time at the bookstore down the street and claimed to love talking to neighbors, asking too many questions, complimenting things she'd only seen once. At first, I had brushed it off. She reminded me of my cousin, clingy but well-meaning. But lately, her presence had begun to gnaw at the edges of my comfort. She knew things she shouldn't. She seemed to appear in the wrong places at the wrong times. Daniel and I had bought the house 3 years earlier, a charming structure with French windows that looked out onto the hedge separating us from Melissa's kitchen. I loved the house. I had spent hours restoring the chipped wood, sanding floors, painting walls. even restoring the old fireplace in the living room. It had been my sanctuary, my space to breathe. But over the last months, it had begun to feel less like a refuge and more like a stage on which someone else could walk freely. I remembered my father's warning from years back. Robert, a retired carpenter, had always been blunt about boundaries. "People who want your walls will take your roof if you let them," he would say, as if the lesson had to be hammered into my head repeatedly. Now, with the creak of the floorboard, the fading light, the whisper that seemed to float through the hall, I understood precisely what he meant. Melissa wasn't just curious, she had begun to cross the line. I clutched the sheet to my chest and tried to convince myself it was a dream, but every instinct screamed that it wasn't. I'd noticed small things in the days before. My favorite candle missing from the living room, a framed photo of Daniel and me from our wedding gone for a few days, then returned with subtle differences. Objects had shifted slightly, drawers were left ajar, even our front door had been unlocked once when Daniel swore he hadn't touched it. I stayed frozen until I heard the soft padding of bare feet. My mind spun. Melissa had to be outside, right? She wasn't supposed to have a key. She couldn't just... Could she? I wanted to run, to scream, but I knew it would alert her. Instead, I slid the sheet off and crept toward the doorway, phone in hand. The whisper came again, closer this time. "You don't have to be afraid." My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. In that moment, fear wasn't just about Melissa holding a knife or stepping into our kitchen. It was realizing that she had been watching, learning, preparing. My sanctuary, the one place I had trusted completely, was no longer mine. I realized then that this invasion wasn't just about trespassing. It was about control, about making me question my own judgment, about shifting the balance of my life without ever lifting a hand, and somehow the thought of Daniel being away only made it worse. If he had been home, perhaps he would have stopped her. But now it was just me. Just me and a stranger who claimed to care more than the person I had promised to trust for life. Melissa's intrusion didn't happen overnight. It crept in, subtle and slow, until one day I realized my house no longer felt like my own. It started with small compliments, her eyes lingering on Daniel, the way she leaned in slightly closer than appropriate during neighborhood barbecues, brushing against his arm under the guise of casual touch. Daniel laughed them off. He never seemed to notice, or maybe he refused to. I wasn't sure which was worse, ignoring the signs or being blind to them entirely. The objects that began to vanish were the first undeniable evidence. My lipstick, perfume, even small pieces of our kitchenware disappeared. Occasionally things would return, rearranged or altered. I began checking every drawer, every cabinet, every corner for signs of tampering. The anxiety was constant, gnawing. Melissa's attentions had turned invasive. Her presence across the hedge in broad daylight always carried a knowing smile, a gaze that followed me even when I tried to ignore it. One afternoon I called my father. His voice was gruff, but steady. "Claire, you need to take this seriously. A neighbor is like a fence. Either they keep out trouble or let it in. Which kind is she?" "She makes me feel replaced," I admitted, my throat tight. "Then bolt your doors tighter than your heart," he said. I thought I had taken his advice seriously. I changed the locks, invested in extra latches, alarms, and cameras. But Melissa seemed to know the creaks, the rhythms of the house. She was always just a step ahead, appearing where she shouldn't, smiling too knowingly, offering help I hadn't asked for. I became obsessed with tracking her movements, noticing every visit, every fleeting glance across the hedge. I felt myself shrinking, my world closing into the small walls I had once loved. One evening, Daniel came home later than usual. I was pacing the kitchen, monitoring the cameras on my phone, trying to reassure myself that nothing was wrong. "Claire," he said gently, "you're obsessing. She's just curious, not dangerous." But the truth didn't feel so simple. Curiosity didn't enter a house uninvited. Curiosity didn't return missing objects with cryptic hints. Curiosity didn't whisper in the dark. I realized the tension had less to do with Melissa herself and more with the erosion of trust in my own instincts. I had always been confident, decisive, but now every sound, every shadow, every smile across the hedge seemed threatening. I began to sleep with my phone on the pillow, the brightness casting eerie reflections on the ceiling. Every time the floorboard creaked, my heart jumped. Every car door slammed outside. I held my breath. Melissa's attention had become a form of suffocating weight. The house, which had once been a haven, now felt like a trap, a theater in which I was being scrutinized endlessly. The breaking point came on July 23rd, 1:42 a.m. I woke to the creak in the hallway again, louder this time, deliberate. My pulse pounded as I lifted my phone to full brightness. Shadows moved in the kitchen. Melissa stood there, barefoot, holding one of my kitchen knives. The familiar calm in her expression was almost maternal, chilling in its intensity. "You don't see it, Claire," she said, voice soft, almost hypnotic. "He doesn't love you. He lies. I've heard the fights. I've watched him. I'm here to protect you." I swallowed hard, hands trembling. "You broke into my house." "Not broke in," she corrected, stepping closer. "I know the creaks now. The house knows me." My mind raced. Daniel was away. My father's voice echoed in my memory, warning about letting someone inside too easily. Fear twisted into anger and adrenaline. I needed a plan, a way to escape without triggering her. Slowly, I edged toward the back door, keeping the knife in her sight but out of reach. "Melissa, put it down, please." Her eyes softened, a flicker of hurt. "Don't call them. I'm the only one who cares." I didn't argue. I pressed 911 on my phone, speaking in a quiet whisper as I moved. Seconds later, sirens wailed in the distance. Melissa hesitated, eyes flicking toward the sound, and then she dropped the knife. The officers were inside moments later, taking her into custody without struggle. The aftermath was surreal. Melissa was charged with trespassing and harassment. Daniel tried to reassure me, holding me tightly. "She's sick, Claire. This isn't your fault." But even as he spoke, I felt the seed of doubt Melissa had planted. Had Daniel really been honest? Was she inventing stories to make me fearful? To control me? Every shadow in the hallway, every creak in the floor, reminded me that my sanctuary had been violated in ways words couldn't undo. I found myself obsessively checking locks, cameras, and even the hedge between our homes. The sense of security I had built over years of restoring our house was gone. I realized that trust, once fractured, was a fragile thing. And worse, it wasn't Melissa who had broken it. It was the invasion into my perception of reality, my ability to feel safe. 2 weeks later, I opened our mailbox to find a small parcel. Inside was the missing wedding photo, the glass replaced, the frame cracked. On the back, in neat handwriting, "A house can't hold two queens. One will always move out." I dropped it, glass shattering on the porch. The horror wasn't just Melissa's obsession, it was the doubt she left behind. The realization that even in the supposed safety of home, control could be wrested, trust could be manipulated, and the sense of being secure could be illusory. Daniel reassured me again, but the lesson was clear. Boundaries matter, instincts matter, and protecting your sanctuary requires vigilance. True security comes from respecting boundaries, trusting your instincts, and asserting control over your own space. Letting others overstep even subtly can erode safety and peace faster than any direct threat. I didn't always know I had a weakness for companionship. Growing up, my parents' divorce left me wary of closeness. My mom had been a whirlwind of stress and distraction, and my dad had vanished somewhere in the folds of bitterness and work. I learned early that people could disappoint you sometimes when you needed them most. Yet when Amber Rowe came into my life, I convinced myself she was different. Maybe she was, at least at first. I first noticed her in sophomore year at Seattle State University. The library was buzzing with the low hum of study lamps and whispered discussions. I was buried in my psychology textbook, sketching absent-minded doodles in the margins of my notebook. Amber was in the cubicle across from me, organized, calm, her notes color-coded with precision I envied. She had this quiet presence, a soft-spoken energy that made the chaos of finals week feel manageable. I watched her for a few weeks before working up the courage to speak. "Hey, do you mind if I sit here?" I asked one day, sliding into the chair across from her. She looked up, smiled, and nodded. "Of course. I like company while I study." From that moment, it was like a switch flipped. We became inseparable study partners, sharing ramen at the library cafe and late-night walks back to the dorms. I told her things I rarely told anyone, like my lingering fear of people letting me down, the quiet panic that sometimes stole over me when my thoughts spiraled. She listened, she understood, or at least she made me feel like she did. "Amber's like the sister I never had," I said to my mom once over FaceTime, my hand clutching a mug of lukewarm tea. "Different doesn't mean safe," my mom warned, her eyes sharp, voice soft but firm. I brushed it off, thinking she didn't understand. Amber was safe. She was my anchor. It wasn't until later that I realized safety can be deceptive. The first warning signs were subtle. Amber discouraged me from dating, insisting boys would only distract me. Notes started appearing in my textbooks, small at first. "Stay focused. Stay mine." Her handwriting was unmistakable. I told myself it was a coincidence, the stress of finals playing tricks on me, but the feeling in the pit of my stomach told me otherwise. Something wasn't right. And yet, I stayed. I needed her friendship, craved her attention. It was like a light I couldn't resist, even though my instincts whispered danger. It was early December, and the campus had grown quiet with the approach of finals. Snow hadn't yet come, but the rain turned the sidewalk slick and gray. I had been staying late in the library, the fluorescent lights buzzing like tired wasps above me. Amber's presence had become constant, almost claustrophobic. I sometimes felt her gaze follow me when I was on the phone with friends or scrolling through social media. One evening, I tried to meet Jason, a classmate I'd been casually seeing. Amber's reaction was immediate. She cornered me near my dorm after I returned from our brief coffee date. "You should have told me," she whispered, her voice trembling, almost fragile. But the look in her eyes, sharp, accusing, sent a shiver down my spine. Then there were the small intrusions, scratches on my locker spelling liar, whispered warnings when I mentioned leaving the library, knowing details from my private journal. The rational part of my brain told me Amber was just overly involved, maybe stressed. But every time I tried to pull back, I felt a tightening in my chest, a quiet terror that maybe she wouldn't let me go. I confided in my roommate, trying to sound calm. "She knows too much. Things I never told her." "Maybe you let her in too much," my roommate shrugged, sipping her coffee. "It's on you." I wanted to believe it was my fault, that I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. Amber wasn't just a friend anymore. She had become a presence that followed me, blurred the lines between care and control. One night, I returned to my dorm after class only to find my car tires slashed. Panic rose in my throat as I called Jason for a ride. And then, almost on cue, Amber appeared at the dorm, pale and wide-eyed, her thermos of tea swinging in her hand. "I waited for you in the library. You should have texted me," she said softly, almost plaintively. I laughed nervously, trying to mask the fear rising inside me. But the dread stayed. She knew where I was. She knew what I was doing. And she was always watching. By the second week of December, Amber's behavior escalated. She would arrive at the library before I did, waiting silently in the shadows. When I tried to study alone, she'd hover nearby, commenting on my notes in ways that felt almost too precise, almost invasive. It wasn't just attention anymore. It was ownership. I started seeing Jason less, avoiding phone calls from friends, feeling like I was walking on eggshells. One night I found a note tucked between the pages of my textbook. "You don't need anyone else but me." My hands shook as I read it. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't subtle. Amber had crossed a line, and I didn't know how to step back. I tried confronting her gently. "Amber, I need some space tonight," I said one evening in the library lounge. Her eyes went wide, almost hurt. "Why? I thought we were studying together. Don't you need me?" "I do, but alone too, just for a little while," I stammered. Her shoulders slumped, but her gaze never wavered. "You're trying to leave me," she whispered. "Don't you see? I'm the only one who stays." It was the first time I felt real fear. Not anger, not frustration. Fear. She wasn't just obsessive. She had a strategy, a way of making me doubt myself, making me question my own needs and instincts. I tried to tell myself it was temporary, a phase of final stress. But the late-night encounters, the strange knowledge of my life, the way she followed me from class to dorms, all pointed to a deeper, darker obsession. And then came December 11th. I had been at the library until nearly 2 a.m., textbooks forming a fortress around me, my eyelids heavy with exhaustion. I leaned back in the armchair for a moment, intending to rest my eyes. When I woke with a start, my laptop was gone. Across the lounge, Amber sat in the shadows, clutching it against her chest. "You don't need anyone else but me," she whispered, the words soft but terrifying. "Amber, give it back," I said, my voice trembling. My hand shook as I reached for my phone. She tilted her head, tears glinting in the library light. "Why do you keep trying to leave me? Don't you see? I'm the only one who stays." I backed away slowly, trying to keep calm. With trembling hands, I texted Jason one word: "Help." Within minutes, he arrived along with 2 security guards. Amber didn't resist when they retrieved my laptop. She only stared at me, voice breaking. "You'll regret this. No one else understands you like I do." Even as she was escorted away, her words lingered, sinking into me. The library no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt poisoned, every shadow suspicious, every sound a potential threat. My sanctuary had been invaded, my trust weaponized. Winter break brought no relief. 3 weeks later, at my parents' house, I opened the mailbox to find an envelope with no return address. Inside was one of my paintings, altered. My figure was crossed out, replaced by Amber's constellation doodles. A message was scrawled neatly on the back. "Stars don't need friends, they only need each other." My stomach twisted. Amber wasn't gone. She had simply moved her game to another stage. I realized then that some people's obsession doesn't end with removal, punishment, or distance. They persist, quietly and invisibly, leaving shadows behind. I transferred schools, but even then the memory of Amber's presence followed me. I learned to value boundaries, to recognize obsession before it escalates, and to listen to my instincts no matter how uncomfortable. Trust is precious, but safety is paramount. I had been lucky to have security guards, friends, and the clarity to remove myself. Not everyone has that chance. True friendship respects boundaries, allows independence, and never seeks control. Obsession disguised as care is dangerous, and trust must be earned cautiously. Learning to recognize unhealthy attachments and honoring one's own safety can prevent harm before it takes root. I used to believe betrayal was something you could outgrow, the way kids outgrow allergies or bad dreams. When I left Milwaukee for college, I told myself I'd never let anyone cut me open the way Chloe did, stealing the first boy I'd ever loved. That wound stayed with me, but I bandaged it the only way I knew how. I built new bonds, ones I thought were stronger than blood. Hannah became that bond. She wasn't just my roommate, she was my chosen sister. We shared everything from cheap ramen nights in dorm kitchens to whispered secrets about family and fears. She knew about Chloe, about my mother's constant warnings, about the way I sometimes felt like love was a fragile vase in my hands, and I didn't trust myself not to drop it. Hannah promised she'd never be the one to make me bleed. I believed her. By 27, I thought I had done it. I thought I had built a life that was untouchable. I had Mark, the boyfriend with the calm smile and patient hands, who slipped notes into my recipe books and played piano when he thought no one was listening. I had Hannah, the best friend who left sticky notes on my mirror with quotes about resilience and laughter. And I had my little empire online, my blog about cozy rituals, baking, plants, and books that gave strangers a reason to call me relatable. But perfection is brittle. All it takes is one hit, and everything shatters. For me, it happened at 2:37 a.m. on March 14, 2021, when I rolled over in my loft in Chicago, the city lights casting gold streaks on the wet pavement outside, and saw the buzz of an unknown number on my phone. I swiped, thinking it was spam. It wasn't. A video filled the screen. My sheets. My boyfriend. My best friend. The air left my lungs like someone had punched me, and in that moment, every wound from my past ripped back open. Chloe's laughter. My mother's voice. Love is fragile. Friends will either hold you up or break your ribs. I didn't sleep again that night. I lay there, staring at the exposed brick walls I decorated with thrifted frames and dried eucalyptus, and wondered how my life had collapsed in 30 seconds of video. The jazz record on the turntable had spun out long ago, leaving silence so thick it roared. By morning, I was shaking but steady enough to send one text. Meet me. Now. We met at a cafe 2 blocks away. Hannah arrived in my red coat. No, not mine, hers, but close enough that for a second it looked like me walking through the door. She carried my usual latte order and sipped it like she owned it. Her hair was perfectly curled, her smile just a little too calm. When I shoved the phone toward her, she didn't deny it. She didn't flinch. She smiled, cruel and deliberate. "Do you really think he loved you?" she asked, voice dripping with pity. "He told me things, Sophie. He said you're boring now, that all your plants and bread making are cute, but suffocating. He needed someone more alive. I've been alive for him all along." My voice cracked. "You were supposed to be my sister." Hannah leaned forward, eyes glittering. "And sisters share everything." I almost slapped her, but instead I stood, grabbed my bag, and left. Outside, the cold air felt like knives. I didn't cry until I locked myself back in my loft and collapsed against the door. That night, I double-bolted the door. I baked bread, because that was my coping ritual, kneading until my hands ached. The smell should have comforted me. It didn't. At 3:11 a.m., I woke to silence that wasn't silence. Something felt off. I padded to the door. It was unlocked. I swore I had secured it. My heart hammered as I flicked on the bathroom light. Across the mirror, written in crimson lipstick, were the words, "He's mine now." My knees buckled. My phone slipped from my hand, clattering on the tile. I called my mom, sobbing so hard I couldn't form words. "Sweetheart," Marianne said, her voice steady steel. "Leave, right now. Don't stay where ghosts wear your friends' faces." I couldn't leave, not yet. Pride or fear kept me rooted. I scrubbed the mirror until my arms ached, but the words wouldn't disappear from my mind. The next days blurred. Anonymous texts buzzed my phone. "Still baking for him? He eats with me now." Instagram DMs filled with screenshots of Hannah and Mark at restaurants I had introduced them to. A bouquet arrived at my door. Red roses, no note. I tore them apart until petals carpeted the floor. I was unraveling, and Hannah knew it. I tried to confront Mark. I needed answers. Needed to know if he was a willing traitor or just Hannah's pawn. We met in the park, neutral ground, the city buzzing around us. "I didn't want this," he said, looking small for the first time since I'd known him. "Hannah's unstable. She kept pushing, kept showing up. I was stupid. You let her," I snapped. "You chose her." He shook his head. "It wasn't like that." But I had the video. I had the lipstick on my mirror. I had roses dying on my floor. I didn't believe him. Trust had rotted. and there was no salvaging it. That night I packed bags. I planned to leave for Milwaukee, even if it meant facing Chloe again. Maybe time had softened us. Maybe family, however fractured, was safer than this. But when I dragged my suitcase into the hallway, I froze. On my welcome mat sat a candle flickering gently, one of Hannah's handmade candles. The label read in her neat script, "Sisters Forever." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about Mark. He was a tool, a bridge. Hannah didn't want him. She wanted my life. I filed a police report for harassment. The officer nodded sympathetically, but without direct threats, without proof of entry. It felt like paperwork destined for a drawer. I blocked both Hannah and Mark. I deleted Instagram from my phone. I stopped answering emails from sponsors. I moved into my mother's house for 3 months, retreating into her arms like I was 17 again. Marianne held me tighter than she had in years. "I told you, Sophie," she whispered. "Your weakness is your heart. Don't let people use it." For weeks I tried to breathe normally. I gardened with my mom, read books I couldn't finish, tried baking but threw the loaves away untouched. The internet speculated about my silence. I didn't care. I thought distance had saved me. I was wrong. On June 7th, 2021, a package arrived at my mom's house. It was addressed to me in careful handwriting. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. My breath caught. It was me, sleeping in my childhood bedroom. The angle was too close, too recent. On the back, in Hannah's handwriting, were 5 words. "Even family can't keep us apart." Beneath it, smaller, "You'll always be mine too." The walls closed in. My mother's warnings echoed louder than ever. I had thought Hannah's betrayal was about Mark, about jealousy. But this was deeper, darker. Hannah didn't just want to take something from me. She wanted to consume me, to own me. And the worst part? I had once called her my sister. I had chosen her. Betrayal by a lover can cut deep, but betrayal by someone you called family slices to the bone. Trust is sacred, and giving it away blindly can be the most dangerous mistake. The lesson I learned is this: not everyone who wants to stand close to your fire comes to keep you warm. Some come only to watch you burn. I always believed in loyalty. Growing up in Chicago, my dad drilled it into me. "Alicia, people will smile at you, shake your hand, and stab you in the back before you know it. Watch who you trust." I nodded and laughed at the time, thinking corporate life wasn't about trust, it was about skill. I believed in skill. I believed in hard work. I believed in friendship. That belief extended to Grace Lang. We met at Silverwood Consulting just after I transferred from a smaller firm. Grace had this natural magnetism, polished, charismatic, and always poised. When I first saw her poring over spreadsheets in the break room, she offered me a warm smile. "Need help navigating Silverwood?" she asked. I nodded, grateful. Over time, we became office allies. Late nights turned into shared takeout, coffee runs, and whispered strategies in the break room when no one else was around. She brought me soup when I was sick, stayed late when I couldn't finish a campaign deck, and listened when I admitted my insecurities. "You've got this," she said softly during one long night. "That's why I've got your back." And I believed her. Our bond was cemented over deadlines, shared stress, and the Riverfront Hotel campaign, the project both of us coveted. Grace had a way of making me feel like we were a team, inseparable in ambition and vision. I trusted her with drafts, ideas, and even the rawest insecurities about whether I was cut out for corporate life. But my father's words never fully left me. "A smile in the office doesn't always mean a friend," he said over the phone one evening. I laughed, reassuring him. "Dad, Grace isn't like that, we're a team. If I win, she wins." "No, Alicia. If you win, she loses. Don't forget that," he warned. I tucked his words into the back of my mind, dismissing them in favor of faith in our alliance. I thought I could navigate ambition without betrayal. I was wrong. The first signs were subtle. Reports I had carefully prepared disappeared from the shared drives, only to return hours later with minor edits, or, sometimes, untouched, but with strange metadata changes. Grace would email them back with a smile. "Found this buried under the wrong folder. Don't worry, I've got you." I brushed it off, assuming oversight, until our boss called me in one morning. "You sent this email to a client?" he asked sharply. "It's rude, inappropriate, and unprofessional." I froze. I hadn't sent any email. My stomach dropped. Grace, standing by my cubicle, leaned in slightly. "Maybe the system glitched," she said softly. "Don't stress. I can smooth this over for you." I should have felt relief at her support. Instead, a seed of doubt took root. Something felt deliberate, too precise, too convenient. Over the next few weeks, incidents multiplied. My slides were subtly altered, my reports edited, ideas removed from presentations. Grace was always nearby, the perfect friend, smiling and reassuring me that things happen. The whispers followed soon after. Co-workers began hinting, subtly, that I wasn't meeting deadlines, that I might not be up for the campaign. All of it traced back, one way or another, to her. I confided in my older sister one night over wine. "What if I'm imagining it? Paranoid?" I asked. She paused, leaning back in her chair. "Are your reports missing?" "Yes," I admitted. "Are people whispering about you?" "Yes," I said, throat tight. "Then it's not paranoia, Alicia. It's sabotage. Stop calling her your friend." Her words echoed long after we hung up. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to believe in our friendship. But the evidence, small, insidious, consistent, told a different story. October 14th started like any other late night at the office. The Riverfront Hotel pitch loomed over me, and I had stayed late, determined to finish my designs. The lights dimmed automatically, leaving only the faint glow of my screen. I leaned back to stretch, coffee in hand, and froze. Across the floor, Grace sat at my desk. My pulse jumped as I realized she had plugged a flash drive into my computer. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered, though I knew she could hear me. Grace turned, smiling like she'd been caught doing nothing at all. "You weren't supposed to see this," she said softly. "But you should have listened when I told you not to compete with me. There's only room for one of us at the top." The office suddenly felt smaller, oppressive. Her calmness was terrifying. It wasn't fear of violence. It was the precision, the certainty, the way she had orchestrated everything around me, erasing my credibility, undermining my work, and keeping the mask of friendship on. My hands shook. I reached into my bag and began recording with my phone. Her eyes flickered when she realized, and for the first time, her smile faltered. "You'll regret this," she hissed, yanking the flash drive free. The next morning, I handed the footage to HR. Grace denied everything, claiming I was unstable, jealous, overreacting. I felt my stomach tighten as the meeting dragged on. The footage spoke for itself, but the whispers began anew. Colleagues questioning if I had dragged personal drama into the workplace. The Riverfront Hotel campaign was reassigned. My promotion vanished in the fallout. I went home that night to my father, eyes red from crying. "I did everything right," I said quietly, "and I still lost." "You didn't lose, Alicia," he said, steady and calm. "You survived. That's more than most. Remember that." I tried to believe him. I tried to rebuild. But trust, once fractured, is like shattered glass. Every office encounter, every friendly smile, carried a weight I couldn't shake. I had learned the true cost of relying on someone who only played friend when it suited them. 2 months later, I started at a new firm in West Loop. The office smelled of fresh paint and coffee, my desk neatly arranged. For a moment, I felt relief. Maybe I could start over. Then, a folded note on my desk caught my eye. In faint, looping handwriting, familiar somehow, was a single sentence. "We're not done. Friends don't quit on each other. No signature, no indication of how it got there. The faint scent of lavender lingered on the paper. My blood ran cold. Grace had always been one step ahead. The game hadn't ended. It had only shifted boards. I realized then that vigilance is a lifelong skill. Trust must be earned, guarded, and occasionally withdrawn. I folded the note carefully, placing it in my bag. I would survive. I had survived before. But the lesson had been carved into me. Friendship and ambition can coexist, but betrayal can hide behind the brightest smile. Not all who call themselves friends act in your best interest. True alliances respect boundaries, recognize ambition without undermining, and operate with transparency. Protect your work, your trust, and your space. Survival often depends more on caution than goodwill. I used to believe college was going to be the clean slate I'd been waiting for my whole life. Back in Oregon, people knew me as the quiet girl who drew murals in her notebooks and kept her head down while her dad worked 12-hour days at the repair shop. My mom had left years earlier, leaving behind nothing but a few blurry photographs and a shoebox of broken promises. Dad did his best to raise me, but the truth is, I learned early that loneliness can make you crave people in a way that's dangerous. When I boarded the plane to Boston for Ashton College, my dad squeezed my shoulder and said, "Don't trust easy smiles, kiddo. You've got a soft heart." I laughed like it was a corny line from a movie, but it stayed with me. Because when I met Rachel and Tessa during my first week, they were all easy smiles and open arms, and I mistook that for safety. They were sophomores, seasoned, magnetic, everything I thought I wasn't. Rachel was a theater minor who wore vintage perfumes and always seemed to have an audience. Tessa had an alt-rock edge, bass guitar slung across her shoulder, sarcasm dripping from her tongue like second nature. And me? I was the freshman clinging to them, sketchbook in hand, grateful not to eat alone in the dining hall. We became inseparable, or at least it looked that way from the outside. Library study marathons, thrift store hunts, coffee runs at 1 in the morning. I thought I'd found my place finally. But sometimes belonging is just a trick mirror. It shows you the version you want to see, not the reflection waiting underneath. The first cracks were easy to ignore. They always are. Rachel would joke about my boyfriend Jordan, a senior who had noticed my sketches in the library. "He's out of your league, babe," she'd say, smiling too wide. "Careful." Tessa, tapping her pen so hard it dented the table, muttered once, "Don't forget who helped you fit in. Boys leave. We don't." I laughed it off, too eager to keep the peace. I didn't want to be the dramatic friend, the one who couldn't take a joke. But one night, walking back from the art building, I passed their dorm room and heard Rachel's voice through the door. "She thinks she's better than us. Watch her crash." The words stung, but I told myself I'd misheard. I told myself the way they looked at me sometimes, sharp, assessing, wasn't what it felt like. I told myself too many things. Then came the invitation. Rachel leaned against my desk, perfume clouding the air, and said, "Come to the Riverside party. One night, no Jordan, just us. We'll remind you where you belong." Her tone was light, but the word belong caught in my chest. I wanted so badly to believe I still did. The frat house at 212 Riverside Drive was pulsing when we arrived, bass rattling the old floorboards. I clutched a red cup, untouched, trying not to feel small among the strangers pressed shoulder to shoulder, shouting over music. "Loosen up, Maya," Tessa urged, pressing a cup back into my hand when I set it down. "Don't be such a saint." I sipped once. The taste was too sweet, syrupy. My instincts told me to put it down, so I did. Rachel's eyes narrowed as if I'd broken some unspoken rule. Later, in the cramped living room, Rachel leaned close, her breath hot with alcohol. "You think you're special because he chose you? We made you, don't forget." I tried to laugh it off, but it came out thin. "What are you talking about?" She smirked. "Without us, you'd still be the sad little freshman eating lunch alone. I stood, heart hammering. I think I'm done here. Tessa blocked the door, smirk sharp as glass. One night won't kill you. Something inside me twisted. My dad's voice echoed. Don't trust easy smiles. My heart pounded against my ribs like it wanted out. It only got worse as the night deepened. Strangers pressed in too close. Rachel whispered into one of the boy's ears, and he laughed, eyes sliding toward me. She'll go along, I overheard her say. She owes us. When someone suggested a game of truth or dare, Rachel's voice sliced through the crowd. Maya first. No, I said, shaking my head. Tessa's face twisted, ugly in the strobe light. God, you think you're better. Watch how fast you fall. The room felt smaller, the air thick. I shoved past them, stumbling into the hallway, and bolted into the bathroom. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my phone as I locked the door. I dialed Jordan. When his voice came through, I nearly sobbed. Please, come now. I'm at Riverside. 10 minutes stretched like an eternity. Fists pounded on the bathroom door. Laughter echoed. Then I heard Jordan's voice, loud, firm, cutting through the noise. When he pulled me out, Rachel's voice followed. Run, little saint. We'll tell them you begged for it. By Monday morning, the rumor spread like fire. Maya hooked up with half the frat. People whispered in hallways, professors gave me lingering looks, strangers stared. Rachel and Tessa walked the halls, smiling sweetly, arm in arm, as if consoling me. Their performance was flawless. Jordan believed me, stood by me, but the damage was done. My reputation tanked. I dropped my art elective because every time I tried to draw, I heard their laughter. My sketches of cityscapes turned into scribbles I couldn't finish. At home, my dad's voice on the phone was tight with worry. Em, you okay? I'm fine, I lied. You don't sound fine. I wanted to tell him everything, but how do you explain to someone who's worked with wrenches and grease his whole life that friendship can be sharper than any blade? 2 weeks later, I found a padded envelope in my dorm mailbox. No return address. Inside was one of my own sketchbooks, the one I'd left in Rachel's dorm weeks earlier. The pages were ripped out, defaced with thick black marker. My murals of Boston streets were ruined, slashed through with one repeated sentence scrawled in Tessa's messy handwriting. Better than us? Never. On the last page, taped crookedly, was a photo from the Riverside party. Me, mid-scream, eyes wide, Rachel's arm draped around my shoulders. Underneath, in block letters, best memories are the ones we make last forever. I sat on my bed, sketchbook in my lap, staring until the words blurred. The horror wasn't supernatural. It was ordinary, cruel. I realized then the true trap wasn't the party. It was believing they ever wanted me to belong. Sometimes the people we crave the most are the ones who can break us deepest. Loneliness makes us vulnerable, but real belonging doesn't come from people who need to control or diminish us. It comes from those who want to see us whole, even when we shine. Protect your heart, honor your instincts, and never mistake envy for love. The fluorescent lights in St. Augustine Memorial flickered again as I rubbed my eyes trying to shake off the exhaustion. 3:12 a.m., according to the digital clock above the nurse's station. The trauma ward was quiet, too quiet. I pressed my palms against the counter, hoping the hum of the overhead lights would help me focus, but the buzzing only made the air feel heavier. I'd been working nights for 6 years now, and I knew what silence could hide. I thought about my father as I leaned there, staring at the empty hallways. He'd died when I was 19. Heart attack in a waiting room. The doctors slow to respond. That night had etched itself into me. Every time a patient gasped or panicked, a part of me tensed, remembering that helpless feeling. I swore back then that it wouldn't happen on my watch. I became the guy who stayed late, checked vitals twice, hummed softly in empty rooms, played piano in the lounge. Caring was my refuge, my weapon, my way of keeping guilt at bay. Derek Hale slid past me without a word, coffee in hand, his shoes squeaking lightly on the tile. He had that charm, the kind that made people trust him instantly. He joked about being a night shift wizard, carried a folding chess set in his locker, and had a way of making even the most frustrated nurses laugh. I'd trusted him. We had each other's backs, or so I thought. The first unsettling sign came subtly. A patient's IV was disconnected. I remembered asking Derek if he'd seen anything. He just shrugged. You probably forgot to secure it. Long nights, man. Later, a crash cart malfunctioned while I tried to revive a patient. Derek clapped me on the shoulder, calm as ever. Don't sweat it, I'll cover for you. I laughed, nodded, thanked him. But a nagging thought persisted. Things weren't adding up. Rumors started to slip through the cracks. A nurse whispered one evening, "Be careful, Carter. Derek said you've been dozing off on duty." I laughed it off again. Surely someone was exaggerating. But that evening, when the patient in room 214 screamed, someone tried to smother me. I froze. Derek was standing beside the bed, arms folded, calm as if nothing unusual had happened. He whispered to the attending. Carter was here. He looked exhausted, must have leaned on her chest while checking vitals. My stomach dropped. That wasn't just wrong, it was terrifying. By the next morning, the supervisor called me in. I walked through the snow, numb, trying to remember if I'd done something, anything, that could explain this. I remembered my mother's words over the phone a week ago. A friend who competes with you isn't a friend. Remember what your father always said. A wolf doesn't bite unless it's hungry. I thought about that now, bitterly. Derek wasn't a friend. He was a wolf, and he had been circling me all along. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, but the signs were stacking. Machines malfunctioning during my shifts, misplaced instruments, minor accidents that always seemed to point back to me. Derek's calm demeanor only made the accusations sharper, like ice against skin. And the worst part? I couldn't prove it. Not yet. One night, I confided in my sister. He's framing me, I can feel it, but if I accuse him without proof, I look paranoid. Then stop calling him your friend, she said sharply. Stop letting him sit at your chessboard. Friends don't move pawns to trap you. Easy to say when he's the only one keeping me awake through these nights, I muttered, more to myself than to her. I started watching Derek. At first, I just observed quietly. Small things, his way of lingering in empty rooms, fiddling with charts that weren't his, moving items just slightly out of place. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then, a patient coded, and the defibrillator pads were missing. Derek's explanation? Carter prepped the room earlier. Must have misplaced them. The patient didn't make it. My chest burned with guilt and fear. I realized he wasn't just sabotaging me. He was orchestrating disaster, shaping it carefully so no one would suspect him. I started documenting everything. Hidden camera in my scrubs pocket. Small, but effective. I caught him slipping syringes into drawers, tampering with machines, approaching patients at odd hours. One night I watched him enter room 307 with a pillow. My hands shook as I pulled it away just in time. He smirked. Always the hero, he whispered. I wanted to scream, to report him immediately. But I had to be strategic. Any false accusation would land me in more trouble than I could handle. Weeks turned into months, each shift a balancing act between doing my job and catching him in the act. Every patient, every machine, every detail was a potential trap. My sleep was shredded. My mind ran in endless loops, trying to predict Derek's next move. Even outside work, the anxiety followed me. Friends noticed I was more withdrawn. My sister called me almost nightly, worried about my pale eyes and clenched jaw. You're obsessed, she said once. You need a break. I knew she was right, but stopping wasn't an option. If I let him slip even once, someone could die. Finally, I had enough. The footage was undeniable. Derek manipulating IV lines, tampering with medications, entering patient rooms unobserved. I went straight to the administration. They launched an internal investigation immediately, suspending him pending charges. Relief washed over me briefly, but it didn't last. The damage had already been done. Patients whispered when I walked by. Nurses eyed me with suspicion. Supervisors nodded politely, but trust is not rebuilt with words. Even after Derek was removed, the hospital felt tainted, the shadows following me down every hallway. I tried to focus on my patients, but the paranoia lingered. Every knock at the door, every misfiled chart, every faint flicker of a light set my nerves on edge. 2 months later, I transferred to a hospital in Cleveland. A new start. I told myself the past was behind me, that I could rebuild my life, regain trust, heal from the trauma. First shift, first day, I opened my locker, a chess piece taped to the inside. Derek's Black Knight. No note, no explanation. I felt the old chill crawl down my spine. The game wasn't over. He had been moving pieces long before I noticed, and somewhere he was still thinking 5 steps ahead. I shoved the piece into my pocket and took a deep breath. The lesson was bitter but clear. Trust is fragile, vigilance is vital, and sometimes the only way to protect those who depend on you is to rely on yourself. Even now, years later, I replay those nights in my head, aware that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly in the corner, smiling, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Trust must be earned, not assumed. Vigilance and personal responsibility can prevent disaster when those around you cannot be trusted. Protect what matters most, but never ignore the warning signs of betrayal. I always prided myself on being independent, on managing a chaotic life without losing control. Night shifts at Portland General Hospital were exhausting, but I thrived on routine, precision, and the small victories of helping patients heal. Still, the moment I became a mother, my world tilted in ways I hadn't anticipated. Oliver, my 4-year-old, was the center of everything, yet I constantly felt I was failing him. My husband Chris did his best with long delivery shifts, but even together, we were stretched thin. That was why Carla seemed like a blessing at first. She had been my best friend since high school, and I trusted her implicitly. When I started returning home bleary-eyed after 12-hour shifts, she was there to greet Oliver with her warm, steady presence. He laughed for her, reached for her, and, without realizing, I found myself depending on her as much as he did. "Meg, you can breathe for a moment," Carla said one evening as I collapsed onto the couch, Oliver clutching his stuffed bear. "I've got him. You go rest." Her voice was soothing, unwavering. I believed her, and in those early months, I relaxed into her help. But then, small things started to gnaw at me. Oliver's first word for mommy slipped out as Carla during a play date, and I chalked it up to toddler confusion. But the guilt it triggered was sharp and immediate. I had been too busy, too absent. One night I noticed Oliver humming a tune in his sleep, a lullaby I didn't recognize. I tiptoed to his room and saw Carla in the rocking chair, silhouetted against the moonlight streaming through the blinds. My heart nearly stopped. She hadn't been scheduled to babysit that night. She wasn't meant to be there. And yet, there she was, holding him gently, singing softly. "Carla?" I whispered, unsure if I was dreaming. She turned, smiling faintly. He was having trouble sleeping. I thought I'd help. I forced a laugh, my voice brittle. "Right. Thanks." But the unease didn't fade. A sense of intrusion, of trespass had settled in the pit of my stomach. The lines between friendship, trust, and overreach were already blurring, and I didn't know how far Carla was willing to cross to be part of our lives. Carla's presence grew more pervasive as winter waned into spring. At first it was subtle. She showed up at the daycare pickup lingering longer than necessary, asking about Oliver's routines and preferences with a curiosity that made me uneasy. I began noticing small intrusions in our home. One night I found her bracelet tucked under Oliver's bed. She swore she hadn't been there, but I couldn't shake the suspicion. Oliver's drawings began reflecting something I hadn't taught him. Two women holding his hands, smiling, labeled Mommy and Mommy. The lines and colors were soft, careful, almost as if guided. Teachers started making casual remarks, unaware of the tension building inside me. "Carla is such a sweet mom," one said after a snack session. My stomach dropped. The word mom echoed in my head unsettlingly. Chris was pragmatic, but even he couldn't fully grasp the emotional weight I carried. "Megan, she's just helping because you're never home," he said one evening, exhaling tiredly. "I know she's helping," I replied, my voice strained. "But she's overstepping. Oliver calls her mommy sometimes. That's not normal." "You're exhausted," he said, softening. "Don't let guilt make a villain out of someone who cares about him." I wanted to believe him, but deep down I knew the problem wasn't just guilt. Carla was filling a void I hadn't realized existed, one in Oliver's life and, disturbingly, in mine. I began to see her not as a friend but as a shadow figure, a presence slowly merging with our home, our routines, our son. The tension escalated over the following weeks. Megan's instinct told her something was wrong before she could see it clearly. One night, Oliver woke screaming, terrified. "Auntie Carla was in my room," he cried. I rushed in, heart pounding, only to find the house locked, doors secured. Chris dismissed it as a nightmare, but I couldn't. Something in me knew it wasn't entirely a dream. 2 days later, returning home early from a night shift, I found the house dark, eerily quiet. The front door had been locked, but the living room lights flickered as I approached Oliver's room. There, Carla sat in the rocking chair, gently stroking Oliver's hair and whispering lullabies. My throat went dry. A wedding photo I had placed on the dresser weeks ago had been moved. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice shaking. Carla looked up, startled but smiling. "This house is already mine," she said softly. "You're the one who doesn't belong." I froze, uncertain if fear or disbelief anchored me to the doorway. She wasn't violent, not in a physical sense, but the quiet certainty in her voice made my skin crawl. She had been inside my home, touching my child, asserting an ownership that wasn't hers. I realized then that her obsession had grown beyond boundaries. It had become territorial. Chris finally understood the gravity when I confronted him with the latest incident. "She's in his head, Chris. He listens to her. Even when I'm around," I said, tears threatening to spill. He swallowed hard, frowning. "Then we have to stop her. Lock her out. Call the police if we need to." The problem was deeper than access. Carla had ingrained herself into Oliver's mind with lullabies, drawings, and gentle affirmations. Even if she were removed physically, the psychological hold remained. I started monitoring every visit, locking doors, double-checking schedules, trying to reclaim the space in Oliver's life that should have been ours. And yet, it all came to a head on March 18th. At 12:43 a.m., I was jolted awake by the faint sound of a lullaby drifting down the hall. My pulse spiked as I crept toward Oliver's room. Moonlight revealed Carla in the rocking chair, holding his hand, whispering in that same calm, soothing voice. "Don't you see, Meg?" she murmured. "You're always gone. He needs someone steady. I'm here. I'm always here." I lunged, pulling Oliver into my arms, my phone raised to call the police. The sirens came minutes later, but Carla only whispered to him, "I'll see you soon, sweet boy." Her smile never faltered. Carla was served a restraining order, her claims of just helping dismissed by the court, but many neighbors still whispered sympathy. They couldn't understand the insidiousness of her obsession, the psychological hold she had attempted to establish over my son. Life after that was fragile. I quit night shifts, spending as much time with Oliver as possible, trying to rebuild routines she had attempted to dominate. But the scars of fear and guilt lingered. Oliver, innocent as he was, still asked sometimes, "When is Auntie Carla coming back?" And then came the final reminder. 2 months later, he brought home a new book from daycare. Inside, In looping handwriting I recognized immediately was a note. For my honeybee. Mommy will always be here, watching over you. I sank to the floor, clutching him close, scanning the playground from the window. Somewhere out there, Carla still existed, still watching, still waiting, convinced she had a role that was never hers to claim. The lesson hit me with clarity. Vigilance, boundaries, and the courage to protect what matters are never negotiable. Even trusted friends can overstep, and obsession disguised as care is dangerous. Protecting loved ones means recognizing unhealthy attachment early, asserting boundaries firmly, and acting decisively before harm becomes inevitable. Moving into Hawthorne University felt like stepping into a new life. I wanted everything to be perfect. My dorm, my schedule, my routines. My parents' recent separation left me craving stability, and I thought college would give me that sense of normalcy. My dorm room was small but mine. Fairy lights strung across the walls, photos of sunsets and friends taped up, my camera perched neatly on the desk. I loved photography. It was my way of freezing the world in a frame, holding on to a moment when everything else felt chaotic. Then there was Jenna, my assigned roommate. Friendly, organized, and bright-eyed, she seemed like someone I could finally relax around. She always had snacks in her desk drawers, remembered birthdays, and could chat endlessly about neuroscience. I felt lucky. Maybe for the first time in months, I had someone I could trust. We spent the first few weeks joking about finals, sharing coffee, and comparing schedules. I remember calling my mom one evening giddy. She's perfect, Mom. Organized, smart. She even makes me tea when I'm stressed. My mom's voice came through the phone, cautious. Sweetness isn't the same as kindness, be careful. I laughed nervously. You're paranoid. Jenna's the first person here who actually feels like home. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. The walls of the dorm, the creaking pipes, the cold nights, the buzzing fluorescent lights, felt warmer with Jenna around. I didn't notice the small things at first. My camera moved slightly, photos missing, subtle rearrangements of my desk. Jenna would always smile and say, "Maybe you misplaced them." Stress, I told myself. Finals were coming up. Everyone was tired. The first night it happened, I woke to the familiar sensation of being frozen. My body refused to move, my lungs straining, my heart hammering. The ceiling fan spun lazily, casting shadows that seemed to creep along the walls. At the edge of my bed I could sense a presence. Too close, too still. I couldn't scream. It wasn't my imagination. Jenna's figure leaned over me. Whispered words slipped into my ear. You look so peaceful when you can't move. I jolted awake, gasping, my body finally responding. Jenna sat at her desk, scribbling in her journal, calm as if nothing had happened. My stomach churned. I tried to convince myself it was stress, but deep down I knew it wasn't. During the next week, the episodes multiplied. I started noticing her watching me in subtle ways. At the desk, in the common room, lingering too long near the doorway. She'd ask casually about my dreams, and I realized she knew things I hadn't shared. Details of nightmares, moments from childhood, even small insecurities. One afternoon, I confronted her lightly. How do you know that? Jenna shrugged, calm and collected. I just remember. Things people tell me. Things they show without realizing. I tried to laugh it off, but laughter felt hollow. Every step in the dorm made my stomach tighten. I started confiding in my older brother over the phone. I think she's studying me, like I'm an experiment. Then get out of there, Sophie. Switch rooms, he said, sharp, protective. I can't. If I tell Housing, she'll know. And she'll be angry. I don't want to know what she does when she's angry, I whispered, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles hurt. The sleep paralysis continued. Each time Jenna was nearby, observing. One night I woke mid-paralysis and saw her leaning over me. Her voice was soft but deliberate. Your fear is pure here. No pretending. I tried to scream, tried to push myself awake, and when I finally broke free, she was gone, sitting at her desk, writing meticulous notes. I glanced at her journal, curious and terrified. The page read, 3:17 a.m., attempted scream, failed. 3:19, whispered to her. 3:22, breakthrough, eye contact while paralyzed. My heart pounded. She wasn't keeping secrets. She was documenting my fear like it was some kind of experiment. The next day, I pretended to leave for class but circled back, determined to find more evidence. The dorm room felt oppressive, the walls closer than usual. I spotted her journal unlocked on the desk, and my hands shook as I flipped through it. Page after page described my sleep, my reactions, my smallest movements and sounds. Pulse rate. Faster. Breathing. Shallow. Tears formed. Yes. It was deliberate, invasive, horrifying. I packed my essentials into a bag and stormed straight to housing services. My voice trembled as I explained everything. The sleep paralysis, her presence, her notes. They moved me to a new dorm immediately. Jenna protested, claiming research notes, and insisting I was overreacting. Even in a new room, the feeling lingered. My sleep was disrupted. Shadows in the corners of the room made me jump. I couldn't turn my lights off at night. Every creak of the dorm floor echoed in my chest. Weeks passed. I tried to regain normalcy. Classes, friends, photography. I thought I was safe. I even started sleeping with the lights dimmed. Then, 2 weeks after moving, a plain envelope appeared in my campus mailbox. No return address. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a photograph of me asleep in my new dorm. On the back, written in familiar, precise handwriting, "Paralysis isn't necessary anymore. You're always wide awake to me now." My hands went numb. The fear I thought I'd escaped followed me. The sleep paralysis was nothing compared to this. She had crossed the line completely. She was still watching. I clutched my camera like a shield, scanning the hallway, trying to reassure myself that I wasn't trapped. The true horror wasn't the darkness. It wasn't the dorm creaks. It was the knowledge that someone could study you, manipulate you, and invade the smallest corners of your life while wearing the mask of friendship. I would be vigilant. I would be cautious. And I would never assume that someone's sweetness meant safety again. Trust is earned, not given blindly. Even the kindest gestures can hide harmful intentions. Boundaries, awareness, and vigilance are not paranoia. They are necessary shields in a world where appearances can be deceiving. Protect your personal space, your privacy, and your peace of mind. Sometimes survival depends more on caution than on goodwill.